the public. I am here representing members of Beulah Park community regarding the complete closure of Thornbury and Oban Street. We can see from community consultation that we have a majority of support of the closure of Thornbury Street, Beulah Park. Oban Street closure response also shows support for restricted access to Portrush Road. We dispute point 37 on page 143 of the agenda that the closure of Oban Street was not generally supported. 59% of the community voted for the banning of left-hand turns onto Portrush Road and street closure. We would suggest to the council that Oban Street have a trial of full closure with a review process to be determined by the council. We'd also like 40 kilometres per hour trial to be implemented in these area and Beulah Park during this time. Please refer to the map supplied regarding the street locations and the Department of Infrastructure's final plans. This community surrounding the streets concerned consists of families with small children, elderly with limited language, and young couples moving to quieter, leafy streets of Beulah Park. Cut-through traffic does impact on our community. Our safety crossing the road is compromised, particularly during peak hour. The upgrade of Portrush Road intersection has impacted on our quiet streets. And as I live on the corner of Thornbury and Verdun, we are constantly disturbed at night with the work zone traffic trucks using our street as a cut-through. These vehicles have signage on the back and bang and crash over the speed humps all night long. We have had escalated disruptions, noise and traffic during the road upgrade. We as a community could call the council on a daily basis complaining about the noise, dust, traffic volume and speed. But we have waited for community consultation process to occur. Personally, since my deputation in March 2020, I have been in contact with the council on a monthly basis via phone or email, particularly to David Hayes. David has been extremely helpful regarding feedback and information for our community. From this, other members of our streets have also been in contact via phone or email with the council over safety concerns, traffic volume and the constant cut-through traffic. Many residents have also called DIT. Personally, I've emailed them and left messages. Automated messages state they'll get back to me within 7 days. It is a fact I have not heard from them once. We have been extremely privileged to have the support of our ward councillors Jane Davey and Sarah Hughes. Our community has a listening and supportive ear to our concerns. These discussions regarding the volume, speed and cut-through traffic was first addressed in 2012. It has not been solved. This has been a consistent problem in our community, and with the support of the Burnside Council, we are now only starting to achieve small results to create a safe area for young families, elderly and the residents. Surveys obtained by the council have been recognised to be impacted by the COVID lockdowns and reduced movement through our community. But it did spotlight the volume of traffic has increased by 10% in some streets in Beulah Park, but Thornbury 26% increase and Oban 20%. Verdun Street increased speed of over 2 kilometres per hour. This is during the quieter lockdown periods. Imagine how a community would be impacted if there were no COVID restrictions. The upgrade has increased the use of off-street parking to a dangerous level. Workers, businesses, park and ride all cram and park illegally on a daily basis. Beulah Park as an entire area has congestion on its street and it has escalated. Our small community has spoken regarding what we want. Thornbury Street closed and Oban Street closed. With the support of the council, we hope this is implemented as soon as possible for the safety of our residents. While speaking with many in our community, we look at creating noise-reducing landscaping at the end of Thornbury and Oban Street. Many in the community, such as my family, are happy to help fund the purchase of plants to help reduce noise, screen traffic and create a beautiful outlook to the residents. As a community, we are extremely proud of our streets and would look to help maintaining these areas. We ask the councillors to uphold the recommendation for the total closure of Thornbury Street, to implement a trial total closure of Oban, as well as a 40 km/h patrol through Beulah Park. Our community is asking for our streets to be protected from traffic cut-through, speed and volume. Our families, young, elderly, and of course my demographic, which is in the middle, would ask if you could continue and give us this support. Thank you.
Excellent timing. Yes. Councillor Dawes.
I think we met in the car park, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah, that's right. Now, the administration's given us further advice today about paragraph 37, and you did mention that in your speech. And it says that 15 respondents in the northern part of the catchment area, which was 73%, opposed the closure of Oban. Can you give us the reason why they would not like Oban to be closed?
Well, I think people were still wanting to try and access Portrush Road. I am concerned that some of those votes did not live on that street. In particular, there were businesses on McGill Road who use it as a cut-through. And one that addressed the problem also does actually have a roller door, which again is not on Oban Street. So they're wanting to use this still as a cut-through. So I think that is why those people have objected to it, to still continue the cut-through.
Are there any further questions? If not, then... Oh, sorry, Councillor Davey.
Thanks for coming along tonight, Kate.
Thank you, Jane.
In the event that Oban Street wasn't trialled as a close-off, would there still be benefits for the community with the Thornbury Avenue or Thornbury Street close-off, or would there be interruptions to the flows of traffic and the amenity of the area?
So personally, I've lived on the street 23 years, and as much as, yes, I go down Thornbury Street to access Beulah Road West, I am very happy to change my driving patterns to accommodate, and that's what the community response has been. We're tired of the cut-through traffic. It is extremely difficult to walk your child across the road. We have limited off-street parking, and now that there's more off-street parking from businesses, clients that are going to those businesses, plus the workers, it actually is becoming incredibly dangerous. And I think if we don't cut Oban off, that cut-through traffic will still continue. The volume will not decrease.
Do you have a supplementary question?
I just wanted to ask you about DIT. You said you're not able to get through to anybody to make representations. Were there not group meetings and community meetings with DIT about the upgrade to the intersection and contacts given for the residents to approach?
The only community meeting that I went to was at Church Hall, where they showed the plans, the final plans, and I would say that would have been about 2018. From there we actually found out what was actually going to happen. Prior to that we knew there was an upgrade, but we didn't know the details. In the letterbox we regularly receive flyers in regards to street closures or 40k zones. They all have a reference to an email and a phone number. I have, every time I've received a letter, contacted them, and I have never received a response.
Right, Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Just in terms of the request to do a closure for both, would it not be probably more sensible to actually close Verdun, like pretty much straight at the top end, so it's just sort of like a little culvert for the businesses, so they can access their rear parking, and then you wouldn't have to put the closures on Oban or Thornbury because you're not getting any of that cut-through traffic anyway.
Yes, I see that has been suggested, and to this point, this is the first time it's actually been brought up. Chicanes were suggested at the top of Verdun in the past, and I'm assuming you're thinking the Beulah Road end of Verdun Street.
No, I'm thinking of the
McGill
McGill
Road.
Road. So after the businesses, you just close it there?
I think it won't stop the cut-through, because people are wanting to go from Beulah Road down Verdun, Thornbury Street to access Beulah Road West. And at the end of Thornbury Street is where the lanes are going to decrease from 3 to 2. So I think that it will still have the cut-through traffic.
Okay, sorry. I had the cut-through coming the wrong direction.
No,
clearly.
that's okay. The cut-through is from south to north. And in regards to that, if you did decide to close Verdun Street, it is more practical at the Beulah Road end, where the cut-through traffic is actually mostly coming from.
Thank you very much for your questions and for your answers and your presence, Kathleen. Now call upon Mark Siciliano.
So Mark Siciliano of Beulah Park. Good evening, Mayor, councillors and members of the public. My presence this evening is to represent the community of Beulah Park in regards to the closure of Thornbury Street and Oban Street. From the results of the community vote, it has been made clear that the closures of both Thornbury and Oban Street are in full support. I would like to raise the point that cut-through traffic and speed hasn't significantly increased since the start of the McGill Road and Port Rush Road upgrade. This has been an ongoing issue prior to this development. Since living on Oban Street for just over 2 years, it has always been an issue. This was brought to my attention that this problem has been an ongoing request for several years, that the residents of the surrounding streets have been in favour of street closures. As we are aware, traffic monitoring was undertaken both times during COVID lockdowns, where the true numbers of cut-through traffic was affected significantly. I have witnessed several times the speed in which motorists travel regardless of speed humps. Part of this reason, in my view, is to make a left turn onto Port Rush Road before the light signals change. I've observed many times they're unable to beat the signal change, and it results in a build-up of traffic on Oban Street, somewhat 10 to 15 cars deep. In regard to the speed humps, the noise in which they cause is very disturbing. It's a combination of trailers and heavy vehicles which rattle and make significant noise. What it also causes is motorists who speed prior to the hump, hit their brakes, and then once over the hump proceed to accelerate with force until approaching the next hump, causing constant drowning noise. Furthermore, the most important issue to be raised is the safety of our community. On more than one occasion, I've been abused and beeped at whilst reversing out of my own driveway. The speed in which they turn the corner from Verdun onto Oban, 1 second it's clear, the next they're on top of me, to which the abuse carries out. There are many a times in which I can't even reverse out of my own driveway due to the amount of cut-through traffic. To add to this, we have a major issue of motorists who park either side in an already narrow street, who work at nearby workplaces to catch the bus, causing blockages and further safety issues with cut-through traffic. I've experienced on many occasions my bins failing to be emptied. I have raised this issue with East Waste on each occasion and finally received confirmation of this issue when the driver himself called me personally to apologise for not emptying my bins. I have dash cam footage of this issue. He explained to me that between motorists parking either side of the street and the amount of cars coming in the opposite direction, it is physically impossible to gain access to my bins. He even raised his concern, and his exact words to me were, "I fear for my life every time I turn onto your street. Because when this situation occurs, my only way out is to reverse my truck onto Port Rush Road with oncoming traffic and semi-trailers." He said it is ridiculous and very dangerous. My concerns for the closure of Thornbury and not Oban is motorists will now only use Oban, increasing the cut-through traffic. As I personally stood on the corner of Verdun Street and Oban Street and witnessed the movement of motorists, some choose Oban and some opt for Thornbury. It's obvious that Oban Street will be highly affected if only the closure of Thornbury is applied. In conclusion, I'd like to highly acknowledge that the main issue to be considered here is the safety of the community. We should all have the right to feel safe in our own streets, and unfortunately, this is not the case. We would appreciate the councillors to back the decision to fully close Thornbury Street at this stage and trial the closure of Oban Street, and then to reassess the decision for permanent closure of Oban once Port Rush Road, McGill Road intersection upgrade is complete, to eliminate cut-through traffic and speed for the safety of our community. A suggestion to eliminate street parking could somewhat be fixed by implementing permits for residents. As for motorist speeds, the introduction of 40 km/h speed zones would be beneficial to lowering speeds. However, street closures would eliminate this issue permanently. Thank you for the opportunity to voice our opinion and be heard, and we appreciate your ongoing support. Thank you.
Councillor Lemon.
Thank you very much for coming. You touched on it. Are there no parking restrictions at all on your street, which I presume is Oban Street?
Oban Street, none at all. No yellow lines, no nothing.
But
nothing at all. Yeah, it's you. To be honest, sometimes you can't even fit just a standard car in between. So just they park outside.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I know it's a very narrow street, and I'm just wondering how the East Waste trucks would actually manage to collect your bins from both sides of the street if Oban Street was cut off at Portrush Road.
So I think we've spoken about this even with Thornbury, that the issue will have to reverse from Verdun back, as I'm aware. So at this stage, they're entering off of Portrush Road, turning left, getting halfway, can't fit, and then he's reversing out back onto Portrush. So I am aware that if it was to be closed, they would have to reverse from Verdun, which is obviously a lot safer, into Oban and Thornbury. And that's what they do in a lot of streets of Burnside of Heard.
Sorry, Councillor Jones, and then Councillor.
That's right. Thank you for coming. So, what you're saying, and this is contrary to Kathleen, is that people are cutting through from McGill to go south down Verdun. So therefore, if that was the case, then Councillor Cornish's solution of blocking off Verdun at the north would work.
Yes, for Oban Street, and then you're going to have the issue from Beulah Road still. People are turned in both ways.
So if I'm going down Beulah Road, what's the benefit to me of cutting down Verdun Street? Can't go straight. Okay. So I have to go up down Thornbury.
And then join Portrush to...
Gotcha. Okay.
But majority of the Oban cut through is McGill. It's just left,
Yep.
left onto Verdun, right onto Oban, left back onto Portrush Road.
Okay. Yeah.
Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Worship. That was exactly my question too, because I was still a bit confused because that idea sounded good, but then we were told. So what we're saying is that there is some traffic who's heading west along Beulah Road, turns right onto Verdun, left onto Thornbury, left onto Portrush, and then right onto Beulah on the other side. Right. Okay. As a percentage. What percentage of traffic is cutting through from McGill Road, and what percentage of traffic is going up the Beulah Road, Verdun, round and round?
That's the statistics show. So for Oban Street, I don't live on Thornbury, so.
Okay, I'll change the question, but for Oban. You said you stood on the corner and you've been watching traffic.
Okay, so I would say there's probably 60 Oban, 40% from my end. So when they're turning left off McGill Road onto Verdun,
That's 60%?
60% would go down Oban because obviously it's the first one.
So 60% is the McGill Road people, and then the 40% is the Beulah Road people.
But Thornbury is also copying the Beulah Road as well.
I imagine both cop.
Yeah. So, and because when you're coming down McGill Road, there's not much of a slip lane. There's only about 1 or 2 cars, so the build-up is all the way back. So they just turn left.
But will that be changed when the new intersection is complete? From what I can see, it doesn't look like it because the old Etzer substation is not being changed.
Yeah, where the substation is, nothing's changing.
Nothing there,
They're
yeah.
not increasing the slip lane at all.
Councillor Davis and then Councillor Carbone.
Yeah, so if you live between McGill and the Parade, and then we shut off Oban and Thornbury Street, then the only way to get down Beulah Road is if you go all the way down Verdun Street and then hit McGill and then come through that intersection. I guess what I'm saying is, like, if you shut off Oban and Thornbury, at the moment they're kind of like easing points, right? So the traffic that's travelling down Verdun, either from the north or from the south, it's going to either, if you close both Oban and Thornbury, you're going to intensify the traffic down Verdun Street, either people travelling south or north, and you'll block that, like, even more people, and there'll be no easement for them to get out. Like, if you want to travel down Beulah Road, then how do you do it?
As a resident?
Well, as a car that needs to navigate that intersection or that area, because, like, it's a huge area. So how would you? Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess so. Yeah. Well, she's not watching, so go for it.
So with regards to that, I mean, we're trying to push people off the smaller roads. We're trying to put them on the arterial roads like McGill and the Parade.
Yeah.
So if they want to get onto Beulah Road, they don't need to go on Beulah Road East to get onto Beulah Road West. They can stay on the major roads and then turn up onto Beulah Road to access the Parade or wherever they want to go. Or they can be on the Parade already. I snuck in, sorry, Mayor. So we understand the closures will change the traffic habits and it might push more volume down Verdun Street. But at this point in time, the traffic can't get any worse. And keeping the speed humps on Verdun Street, as much as they're the noisiest things in the world and quite archaic, is a temporary solution, and a chicane might be an option later on.
Yeah. Well, okay, I would say that someone who's travelling down, let's just say someone's travelling west down Beulah Road. At the moment, they can turn right onto Verdun and then escape in Thornbury and then do their dogleg to get down to Beulah Road East. If we change this, what you're gonna,
They go from east to west.
well,
They don't start on Beulah Road. They go
So
straight on
Beulah
the parade.
Road will go east to Port Rush, into the Norwood Council area, which is west. So they come from Beulah Road, they dogleg down Verdun, Thornbury.
Yeah.
If Thornbury's too busy, you can see them slowing and looking, and then they go to Oban and cut through.
yeah, that's right. But if that's not the case, in order for them to get across to Beulah East, they're going to go the full length of Verdun Street.
We realise that could be a possibility.
Because that could make it worse. And that's going both ways, right?
Can I just say, when this was originally implemented back in 2012 with the speed humps on our street, it was so close to the vote to close the streets back then. That's what the community wanted back then. Both of those streets closed, okay? The speed humps have not solved the problem. But at that point in time, the Beulah Road intersection from east to west, where it hits Port Rush Road, did not have traffic lights. And we were told that was a federal government thing. Now, in the future, the federal government might say, because we don't know what they're going to do, we can then put cars crossing there rather than it just being pedestrian bikes. The traffic lights are there, the infrastructure's there.
Yeah.
So we can't predict what's going to happen with regards to that intersection to keep the east-west flowing through Beulah Road.
Yeah.
So we're maybe, as a community, taking a gamble saying we want this shut down.
Because I reckon it could make it worse.
Well, I'm on Verdun Street,
Yeah.
and I have been, and I've never seen it as bad as it is now.
I mean, which side of Verdun Street are you on? Are you on?
I'm on the corner of Verdun and Thornbury Street.
Yeah, Thornbury Street. So at the moment, people coming this way will escape down Oban, and you don't see that
McGill.
coming past you. They're coming down McGill, escape that way.
As I just mentioned before, they will stop and look, and if there's 15
Yeah.
cars on Mark Street, they'll come up to Thornbury and do it on
Yeah.
Thornbury.
My-
So they
my
do have two
concern-
choices.
My concern is you've got
Councillor
both-
Davis, might be worthwhile keeping that for the debate.
Yeah.
Oh,
All right,
sorry.
and
Yeah.
because
I
we
see your
have
point,
got
though.
another person asking a question, and we also have another presenter who might
Yeah, okay.
provide
Thanks.
you might like to ask them instead, that's all. All right, so Councillor Carr, last question, if that's okay with everybody, and then we'll move to the last representative.
This has been great. I think we've come a long way in the last 5 minutes to understand this issue. I suppose my question to you is, which one should we tackle first? The McGill Road problem or the Beulah Road problem, in your opinion?
It might be, I'm going to be biased because I live on Open Street, but at the same time, I think Thornbury, I feel that Open Street is only getting used from more so from McGill, people turning off McGill, whereas I think Thornbury's copying from McGill and Beulah Road. So I think Thornbury deserves it first, personally. I think they're getting a lot more. But, as I mentioned, if we close that off, they've only got one option.
You get
after
all of
that,
it. Yeah.
And it's just going to be a
Thank you, Mark, very much for answering all those questions. And now we'll hear from our third representative. Suslia Palanapan.
Yeah, my name is Sushila Paliniappan. I also represent Beulah Park area. I'm ratepayer and resident in Burnside, but this particular issue is with regard to the business that we own on McGill Road, 238 McGill Road. And I sympathize with people who have put their issues in front of the council. I can see where they're coming from because we have 500 clients who come to the business over the year, and we have 5 employees who use the Verdun Road to come into the back area where we have our parking. So we appreciate the concerns they're raising about the speed bumps. I would highly support the 40-kilometer speed if that is an option. That would certainly reduce some issues. I also appreciate blocking Verdun either on the northern side or south side. It's not an issue, but I do question the validity or support in cutting the access to Urban and Thornbury from Portrush Road as well as to Portrush Road, because a lot of the clients, if they come eastwards on Miggle Road to come to our office, which is two blocks east of Verdun, have to bank up to turn right, including the employees. And what happens in peak hour traffic is some cars stop and let the person waiting to turn right into Verdun access, including my son, who's not here today, sorry, he couldn't come. And he thought he had right of access, checked to turn, but there was a cyclist speeding through on the inside lane. And it's God's grace that the cyclist wasn't totaled. And I'm a cyclist myself, and years ago when Beulah Road allowed vehicular access across from east to west and west to east before this only pedestrian bicycle pathway was happening, the issue wasn't as bad. I would look at this federal highway changes about why the issue of east-west thoroughfare between Beulah Road was stopped, because a lot of these issues being raised are because of the dog-legging. And I would be supportive of Verdun being blocked on either end to allow for businesses to carry on, but I'm not supportive of Oban or Thornbury being shut. And I don't have the stats on vehicular flow. All I know is we have fair few clients who need to access to come there, and turning right off McGill heading east is very difficult on Verdun the way it is. Blocking it would still mean they will take an official legal right at the lights, come left onto Urban and come into the area too. And parking timings, I'm supportive of that as well. Highly supportive of some of the issues the other speakers have raised. So that's it from me.
Thank you, Sushila. Now, questions from anyone? Councillor Davis, did you want to take up at all? No? Anyone else wish to ask a question? All right, well, thank you very much for coming in, Sushila, and presenting to us. Thank you.
I don't know if you wanted to add anything. No? Yeah. Okay. Thank you all. If there are no questions, thank you.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to put it to you that perhaps we carry on and move straight to 11.3, unless there are objections to that. It seems kind of sensible. We've been having this kind of almost an informal discussion. We have the representatives here who'd like to hear the outcome. So unless there's any objection, we will move immediately to 13.3, and I seek a mover, Councillor Davey.
Thanks, Your Worship. I have got an alternative motion that I've sent through. Slightly amended motion. Have you got that, Helen? So I'll read it out. Well, it's that Council receives and notes the report. 2, supports the full closure of Thornbury Street, Beulah Park at the intersection with Portrush Road to improve residential amenity and safety and control through traffic, and the removal of the street's road speed humps. 3, request the Department of Infrastructure and Transport undertake the required civil work for the full closure as soon as possible as part of the Portrush Road, McGill Road intersection upgrade. 4, installs landscaping at the closure site in consultation with the affected community. 5, requests the Department of Infrastructure and Transport to implement an immediate 40 km/h speed limit for traffic management in Verdun Street, Oban Street and Thornbury Street until closure is effected for the duration of the intersection upgrade. 6, advises residents and businesses directly engaged as part of the road closure process of the council decisions. And 7, I'll add another, we've just had a point raised that monitors street parking and continues, or perhaps reviews street parking, reviews street parking and continues to monitor traffic in these streets and the Beulah Park area, and receives a report by the end of March 2022 detailing progress with the closure. And then I'll add impact on Oban Street, results of the reduced speed limits and the impacts on the local and wider community. Thank you. Reviews street parking. Reviews street parking, continues to monitor traffic in these streets and the Beulah Park area, and receives a report by end of March 2022 detailing progress with the closure, impact on Oban Street, results of the reduced speed limits and the impacts on the local and wider community. Thank you for your patience. Well, we've heard tonight the impacts of the intersection upgrade, and in fact we've had, over the last 10 years, we've done quite a lot of work on consideration of this small area of Beulah Park with its congestion and the through traffic issues. It's been very clearly outlined how the urban infill and densification issues mean that many of the small properties there have more cars parked on the already narrow streets, with a lot of traffic flowing through. The greatest impost has been use of the Verdun, Thornbury and Oban streets by volumes of cut-through traffic. As we've heard, locals are very concerned about safety, particularly the increasing population of children, as well as for the many older members of the community, especially when commuting to schools, buses and shops, etc. All of these challenges have increased with the onset of the huge upgrade at the Portrush Road, McGill Road intersection, causing major impact on these residents and businesses and increasing significantly the through traffic in patchy ways. Closing Thornbury is essential for local safety to stop motorists turning from Portrush and cutting through from McGill via Verdun to Portrush, and this is supported by the community. I also think Oban Street would benefit from closure, as we've heard tonight, clearly outlined, but some members of the community are ambivalent at this stage. Verdun Street between McGill Road and Beulah Road suffers from volumes of through traffic, which since the addition of the speed humps has modified slightly. But as we've also heard, and feedback has been provided, the speed humps are very noisy, and changes in Thornbury, I think, warrant a 40 km/h trial to deter traffic from entering from McGill Road in particular. It's a very congested street if anyone has driven down it, with residents, with the businesses at the McGill Road end. It's just parking both sides of the street, it's just very congested. The Department of Transport work on the intersection is being promoted as designed to keep the through traffic actually on McGill Road and Portrush Road and not using local streets. Experience shows this might be a pie in the sky objective. I hope it's not. I hope it really does work and that the traffic heading to the city does actually use, well, both north south and east and west does actually use the new roads. Residents deserve, with the street closure at Thornbury, which is heavily supported, I think residents deserve some decent landscaping. And the other key issue is monitoring of the local streets by council during and after these changes, and a report to council in 6 months' time, which will enable us to review the changes, how they've affected the immediate area, how Oban has experienced the changes, and they will also help with the new traffic master plan that we're developing at this stage. So I hope you'll support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Davis had his hand up first to second. I don't want to second. Oh, you don't? Well, okay. Yeah, your second, Councillor Hughes. Do you wish to speak now, or? I will reserve. You'll reserve your right. Councillor Davis, do you wish to speak now then?
Yeah. Well, can I propose, because I have a number of questions for administration, and I think we would benefit from going into informal. And so I think that that kind of discussion, that forum would be better off. So I'd like to ask if we can go informal.
You happy to second that? Those who approve of that, raise your hand. Those against? For a time, 15 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
15, could you just add into that for 15 minutes?
I think, can I just, yeah. So my concern is that if we go down Oban and if we block off Oban and Thornbury Street, my concern is that there will be backed up traffic the whole way down Verdun. And to my mind, the biggest problem is the intersection between Port Road and Beulah Road. And that's what's stopping residents from that kind of pull between McGill Road and the parade from, say, reaching, like Norwood Primary or trying to get west. So I'm just wondering, so I understand that this is an approach where we can just go ahead and cut these off, but what I was hoping the administration might be able to discuss is, I'm not so keen to just rush in and close them off, because once we do it, it could be so much worse. Is there a way that we could do a temporary measure or at least assess what that block would do, or do some traffic modelling or something before we take this step?
Through Madam Mayor, just one point. My understanding is the recommendation's talking about Thornbury only at this stage.
Is it? Okay.
Yes.
Does that change
Yes,
it?
this motion still only specifies Thornbury.
Does that change your line of thought?
Well,
Councillor Davis?
can we have a discussion about that as well? I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Because I think that if you close off Thornbury, the residents of Oban are definitely going to say block.
I think it goes wider than that. I think it's
And down ahead.
on Howard Terrace,
Yeah.
which is the next street along from Verdun. Now, Sarah was next, and then Councillor.
Can I?
Oh, well,
can I
can the
just,
administration?
Well, can I just ask a question that perhaps administration can answer? But the way I've interpreted the report, the road closure is not being driven by cut-through traffic. It's a consideration of DIT, about the fact that Department of Infrastructure, not DIT, the DIT, they'll actually become going from 3 lanes to 2 lanes at that point. So I think one of the things that we probably haven't heard that would be good to get administration to talk about is the actual, one of the drivers is safety, my understanding, on Portrush Road, not necessarily driven by cut-through traffic, if they could just clarify that.
If I may, Mayor, I'd also like to ask administration just to give a bit of broad commentary on the representations that were made this evening too, if we may. Just any thoughts you may have had when you listened to the representations from the community.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. I know they've been communicating with you.
Thank you. Through the Chair. With regard to the proposed road closures, it's correct that the left turn out of both Thornbury and Oban were consulted on and considered back in 2012. That didn't go ahead. With the McGill Road and Portrush Road intersection upgrade, DIT proposed to ban left turns into Thornbury because that was the tail end of 3 lanes merging to 2. And it was considered this would be an opportune time to also revisit the left turn ban, which would result in a full closure of Thornbury Street at the western end. And Oban was included in that community engagement. So if that... Sorry, could you just repeat the question?
Through your worship, my question is, First of all, if we only close Thornbury, my suggestion would be that Oban gets way worse. And then secondly, if we were to close both of those streets, then, I mean, would the situation along Verdun be made much worse because there's no relieving pressure now along Oban and Thornbury? All that pressure needs to then travel the full length of Verdun.
It's very difficult to predict accurately. However, if Thornbury was closed fully and Oban wasn't, my feeling is Oban Street would increase slightly, but drivers wanting to cut through from Beulah Road, and that's certainly a much greater cut through pattern than from McGill Road. Traffic wanting to cut through from McGill Road to head south, for example, would typically turn off earlier than Verdun Street because Verdun's the last street before the Portrush Road intersection. So when traffic's really banked up, they'd be turning off in an earlier street. Now I'm just trying to keep track of my thoughts. With traffic, as I said, some traffic would likely, if they can't get out Thornbury Street onto Portrush Road, would travel north and then turn left via Oban. They would also have to go over 2 additional speed humps, so we think that would deter some traffic, but yeah, certainly volumes would need to be closely monitored.
Your Worship, is it possible we do, rather than actually support a closure, is it possible we do a trial closure of the roads without formally closing it? Because this could improve things, but it could also make it worse, as you know, using my expert traffic management brain, which I don't have. Yeah, would Deputy support a temporary closure so we can monitor it?
Excuse me, can I just ask what the rationale was for DIT agreeing to the closure? Is there because they've gone through a whole rationale and we've had a public consultation process for the closure.
Can we do a trial? Is that possible?
No, why would you do a trial?
Can I let Councillor Jones have a go?
I'd just like to say, I agree with Councillor Davis. I think a trial would be a good idea. I think closing Thornbury without closing Oban is going to be an utter disaster. And so what I propose, why don't we do a month of closing one, then a month of closing the other one, and then a month of closing both, and then see what it looks like. And then for 3 months' time, we can regroup and see where we're at.
CEO would like to have a comment.
I know what I'd like, Madam Mayor, is for a traffic expert just to give us his opinion
I agree.
on perhaps those couple of scenarios you've just heard being thrown around. Thanks, Dave.
Look, a couple of things. As far as trialling closures, I mean, DIT are committed to closing the left turns into Thornbury. That's going to go ahead regardless. The process from a technical perspective of closing roads, be it temporary or permanent, is basically the same thing. Public notice, resolution of a council, etc. It basically would be the form of the closure, whether we actually invest money in the infrastructure or something of a more temporary nature. But yes, I'll just add, so DIT have formally approved the full closure of Thornbury Street. They have not considered Oban Street at this stage. And ultimately, it is their decision, because all intersections that connect with an arterial road come under their care and control, and but they, in a street like Oban Street, they would probably side with council, I'm guessing. As far as closures of Verdun Street, that's not something we've consulted on, so that's something we perhaps need to think about. Take that back to the community.
My concern with that, Mr Hayes, is if we were to close Verdun, the problems would move up a street. So Howard, which is already a massive cut-through street, going up towards McGill, is already a major cut street. So is the next one on the other side of Mellor Reserve. So that potentially, to cut that street off, would have a massive impact on further Beulah Park residents, I believe.
Correct. The traffic volumes in Howard Street, I'd have to dig them up, I have them handy, but is significantly greater than the volume of Verdun Street.
It seems common sense that you've got to close both. I don't understand how anyone cannot get that. You've got two streets that are 50 metres apart. You close one, anyone with half a brain is going to go to the other street. I would do it. Anyone in here would do it. So I suppose, Your Worship, my question to the staff is, how could we possibly justify closing one and not the other? I'm against it, but I'm probably just, it could be rhetorical. I'm just curious to hear the other side of the equation as to why you would do that.
I just wanted to ask, because I think it's actually important to provide some wider context. Perhaps, I know that the city master plan is being developed around traffic management, but I think I'm just wondering whether staff could perhaps give an update around some preliminary findings in this area, because I think when we're making these decisions, we shouldn't just be looking at one or two streets. We need to look at a wider and broader picture of how we're managing traffic within the city. And secondly, I'd just like to ask how many of us are actually traffic engineers that are sitting around the table, and I guess a recommendation has been put in a report. I think for us to sit and throw suggestions, we just need to consider our qualifications in doing so.
What are the thoughts in terms of advocating for the opening of the east-west traffic along Beulah Road at the intersection of Port Rush Road? I mean, could we advocate to open that? Because that seems that would relieve most of the pressure.
sorry, before I get to that, sorry, I think Councillor Hughes had questions that I've had to answer to that.
I was curious to hear the other side of the equation as to what the argument would be.
I'm willing to answer. Sorry.
Go on, Mr. Can.
Sorry, I'll answer them both in context if that's okay. Without wanting to jump to the results of what council will decide with the city master plan, and we will be presenting to elected members on the 19th of October at a workshop. We'll be workshopping all opportunities. We are investigating a number of potential 40-kilometre-per-hour precincts throughout the city. And at this stage, Beulah Park and some surrounding suburbs are a key precinct that we have identified as potential 40-kilometre zones that we would like to package up and bundle and present to DIT as a trial in the first instance to make changes throughout the city. Ideally and strategically, we would like to do that as part of that city master plan and do it based on suburbs throughout the city that we believe has the best data or evidence base to support that approach. I'm not sure what DIT's response will be to just a number of streets within that area. However, if council instruct us to proceed in this manner, we will put that to them and we'll see what their response would be at this stage. With respect to our recommendation, Councillor Carbone, as I tried to clarify further in the email today, Thornbury, following our consultation process that we were required to undertake, was quite clear in terms of the community response and also that of the support of DIT, that a closure was warranted. It wasn't quite as clear-cut for Oban, and that was even less clear-cut when you consider the responses that came from the northern section of that catchment area and those 15 properties surrounding Oban itself. Almost 80% of those responses did not support closure. So what we're suggesting is that Thornbury is clear-cut. We recommend to close it. DIT are offering to basically pay for it. We don't have to pay for it. And then we would monitor Oban and the other streets, and we would bring that report back, which would allow fresh counts and fresh surveys at that stage once these closures are in place, and that will give us a true indication of what impacts that would have in the surrounding network.
The time is up for our time, so I'm going to now move back into formal session, and I'm going to ask Councillor Cornish to ask a question, or if he wishes to speak, because you were the only one left on my list. At the moment, you're okay? All right. So I was just going to give you priority. Right, Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I'll speak in favour of the motion. And thank you very much for, through your worship, to the administration for clarifying that. I think Barry's comments were helpful. To my mind, I think, you know, the main problem is the intersection between Portrush and Beulah Road. I think if we close just Thornbury at this stage, we'll have at least a commencing view of what's going to happen in that intersection. So you'll probably see half of the damage happen, and so you'll be able to see half of the problem emerge. And then because what I think will happen is if you close Oban and Thornbury, it'll make that cut-through traffic along Verdun much, much worse. But I don't know that that's the case, and I don't think we've done the traffic modelling of that either. So what we can do, in my mind, is, as Barry suggested, or Director can't, is if we close Thornbury Street, you're going to see the problems emerge pretty quickly. So close one street, see what happens, and then decide whether we reverse that decision or whether we go ahead and close Oban Street. And from my understanding of what the administration were talking about in terms of trials, it seems to make sense to me that we would just put simple bollards in there without actually going and doing extensive work, so that it essentially is a mini trial. So I don't think the 40-kilometre speed limit will help at all, but so be it, because I suspect they're probably going less than 40. So I'm happy to support the motion as is, because then at least that's one step towards it, and then if we need to take the next step, then we can do that. But I'm just hopeful that the administration won't go put in a complete road closure, that they'll keep it temporary for the time being, so that we can monitor it, and that will essentially be a trial period. And if we need to reverse it, we can do that at a later stage. That seems to me like the best way forward. So I will support the motion.
Just point of clarification, Madam Mayor. The motion that's before council, that tells me to close it properly and start planting trees and shrubs and landscaping. That's not. I'm just saying for the benefit of the room. The motion that's before you tells me to.
Well, at the end
do
of
a hard
speaking,
closure.
can I move an amendment?
I just wanted to get rid of the blue wiggly lines by making it affected and putting an S after review, and then it should in the number 7, and it should get rid of the wriggly lines. The grammar telling us we're wrong.
Can I speak? Can I move a motion at the end of my speech?
Well, Councillor Piggott was actually next to speak, so I'll let him speak first, and you can have a moment to reconsider or consider what you want to do. Councillor Piggott.
He's already spoken, Madam Mayor.
Oh, he's already spoken.
I was saying before my time has elapsed, I move my amendment at the end of the speech, rather than doing it at the start of the speech.
Can he?
Yeah, I know, and then I'm finishing it off with an amendment.
I need
as like a
an
little flourish.
adjudication over there from governance, please. I think it's time for Mr. Councillor Piggott to speak.
Boo.
It can be done. Apparently, it can be done.
So my amendment would be to insert light closure. Is that going to give the CEO enough direction?
Can I ask whether it's still within his 3 minutes?
Come on, I think we're playing around with this too much. I think Councillor Piggott, I think it's time for you to speak.
No, because the CEO said that this motion closes at finality. He's going to build a wall.
You got it wrong.
Dip T. Yeah. Councillor Piggott, I think you need to speak. Okay.
Could I propose an amendment, please? And I need to do this a little bit on the hop if I could. So if I could go back to what's happened with the numbers? I wish to propose that we close both Thornbury and Oban on a permanent basis.
You've got to vote this down.
Let's ask they seem to be nodding their heads.
Well, we can bring it back next meeting.
Oh, Hill was right. I thought the way she took it by the scruff and it was absolutely right. This is a special case here. Deputy will close both of them for us. We'll have to close them. Oban's going to get walloped. Not accepting it?
It's an alternate motion, not an amendment.
Okay.
That's what we're getting adjudication on.
Right, very good. Okay. All right, well, perhaps I could speak to the motion, and I don't feel we should accept it as is for a couple of reasons. I do take Councillor Hughes' point about we're very close, hopefully, to a citywide master plan, but these streets are actually special in particularly Thornbury, given that Deputy has, Department of Infrastructure and Transport, have taken the decision to restrict access into it of Portrush Road. So it actually comes up, right now, the situation we need to work out what needs to happen with it. And closing Thornbury is a no-brainer. I think that's absolutely right. What is also, I think, is clear is that it will have, given the description of where the run-through traffic's coming from, it will have an impact, and it's conceded in the report that it'll have an impact on Oban, given that people will still want to do this rather convoluted path to continue down Beulah Road. The extra 2 speed humps for mine are not going to be particularly dissuasive to drivers, and I think we'll be back here pretty soon if we close Thornbury with an issue with Oban. And so for mine, I think we should take the opportunity to talk to the Department of Transport and in regard to both of those streets being closed. The impact on Verdun I don't think is massive. I feel that Councillor Davis's issue around what happens with Beulah Road, and I used to live on Beulah Road a bit further up, what will happen then I think is that rather than people trying to do that, they will choose probably the parade or McGill Road further up and go straight into getting west of Portrush Road. They won't go through that at all. It won't help the people coming off McGill Road and trying to get at Beulah Road, and they will go the whole way. That's true. But that also seems to be a worse problem in further eastern streets. So I feel that it is one of those things that the solution does look at just picking up, and I do accept the recommendation in regard to the numbers, but the numbers are relatively small, and it's not like there's a groundswell actually. The people understand why the northern ones might be against that so much, but I think if we do this in 6 months' time, having closed Thornbury, there won't be a particular problem. There'll be a lot of support to close Oban because it will be taking an absolute whacking, because it's then taking the Thornbury traffic that we've now got rid of. So I feel we should have an alternate motion. I also, if I was to raise an alternate motion, would be withdraw the 40 kilometres an hour. I understand it's put in this time now to have it as a temporary thing, but it is such a controversial issue. I think it muddies the waters. I think at this stage we close the streets, which I think immediately will actually resolve a lot of the issues that are there, and so we should vote this down. And I also accept, thank you Mayor, that it is an alternate motion, it wasn't an amendment.
If this loses, then you have the opportunity to vote that. Councillor Hughes, you are next.
Thank you. I will speak briefly, and
Seconding now,
I am
Ashley.
seconding the motion, and I will support Councillor Davies' motion. I guess I would like to point out that, as Councillor Carbone has pointed out to me, I am supporting the 40k an hour here, didn't support it in Amber Woods. I'm completely inconsistent. I guess my approach was that ultimately the end game is to get that area at 40 k's an hour, and this is to me a bit of a compromise because I think we should only close the one as the staff have recommended in the report. To me it comes down to the safety and the no left turn of Portrush, but it also comes down to the fact that we're all now apparently experts after 10 minutes of hearing people present, and I think the staff have obviously thought this through. There is consideration that's gone into the report, and we're not experts in transport. So I think what we need to do is close this one, see what happens, because we can't actually predict necessarily at this stage the behaviour of how this closure will impact the flow. And I think we've seen, we've had a good balance of deputations this evening, lots of different issues around the area, and I think to act now and just say let's close everything is probably not the right decision without understanding the flow and implications to the wider area. Councillor Davies rightly, and the staff had in there around reviewing the parkings. I think we've heard about that this evening, so adding that element of looking at the parking will perhaps help with Oban, but also getting a report back within our council terms so that we can address this issue. Councillor Davey and myself have taken many complaints from people around the Beulah Park area, and it's not just these three streets, it is a whole issue, and I appreciate the effort that staff are doing across that, but I think we do need to deal with this as the recommendation has come up, but I think we have to think about the bigger picture, and seeing the impacts of this one closure and how that flows on to the wider area will be very important. So I think let's not become experts after hearing 10 minutes of deputations this evening. Let's take a measured approach to our decision making, follow the staff's recommendation, and then when something comes back to the chamber, we can assess with more information and see what the implications to the wider suburb have been. Thank you.
Councillor Davey, you have a question, followed by Councillor Corning.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to ask, in terms of I believe it was DIT who did the community notification about the closure of Thornbury, or it might have been Burnside Council. Could I just ask who did that, and was there any feedback from the community or comment from the community?
Through Your Worship, there were actually two separate consultation processes. DIT undertook the initial consultation with respect to the left-hand turn from Portrush. I'm not completely aware of the feedback or the results of that process. When we were made aware of that proposal, we believed it warranted a full road closure conversation for both Thornbury and Oban at the time to determine the community's thoughts. So we undertook that consultation process, and the results are provided as an attachment to this report. Following that, and to take opportunity of the work that DIT's doing, and it was an efficiency measure, there's a formal notification process which includes public notification for any road closure process. We've done that in anticipation of a council decision for Thornbury to allow us to proceed should council determine to close that road. If we were also to consider closing Oban, we would then also have to do that same process for Oban. That would be a separate process.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Cornish.
I'd like to offer an amendment if I could. Yeah. It's just basically a new 8, and
New
it
8?
is approve subsequent consultation to determine the most appropriate location of a potential council closure of Oban or Verdun North, addressing traffic from McGill Road.
Is that a... You accept that as an amendment, or is that... I think it might go beyond
There's been 2.
I'm just... Governance is just checking.
But well, there hasn't been 2 accepted.
You're going to have to... might have to repeat it in a minute. We are. Yeah. I talked for 4 hours this afternoon and came straight here. Yes, Councillor. Oh, sure. Apparently it is an amendment, but it is the last amendment we are allowed on this item.
Fantastic.
So now you have to repeat it so it can be placed, typed out.
Yep. I'll wait for you.
So all of the number 1 to 7
Yep.
exactly the same. You're adding a number 8.
That's correct.
I've lost it now. It's only 5 there. Yeah. Still hasn't copied right.
There we go. That's all right. Approves subsequent consultation to determine the most appropriate location of a potential council closure of Oban or Verdun North. Potential council closure, or council closure, because it's not a DIPT or DIT closure. Yeah. Of Oban or Verdun North, addressing traffic from McGill Road. I move this amendment. It just basically follows on what from Mr. Camp was just saying in terms of we'd have to go out to consultation again for this section, and I think we should actually give the okay if that needs to actually happen, and should happen, and it should be broadened to actually determine exactly where that closure will happen, because if if transport and infrastructure don't allow it to actually be at the end of Oban, because it's the main road, then it's going to have to be located somewhere else on even Oban. So we need to actually determine the right location for it. So I'm just moving that we give an amendment, we give the administration the right to go out and consult again on this topic with that one, obviously on the current motion as it stands. So I put the amendment to the chamber.
Are you willing to accept? Okay, so then I'm...
Can I just ask a question, a clarification from the staff? Can they do that with, like, I'm sure consultation happens on other things. It doesn't always come to the chamber. So if staff feel that it's appropriate, could they not do that without us anyway, couldn't you? You have that authority anyway?
Through Madam Mayor, just in reference to point 7 there, I'm not sure you'd want to undertake any consultation regarding point 8 until you delivered on point 7. Otherwise you could be... Yes, but the report... Yeah, we don't know the outcome of the report, that's the only thing I'm questioning.
Really,
now, if we don't,
do we need number 8 at all? Because it's a consequence of the next report comes to us.
I'm happy that, obviously, if the report says it gives a guidance so we don't need to do consultation, we won't do it. But, yeah.
Can I suggest that might be the easiest way to go?
Happy to withdraw.
Knowing that the staff have listened to your conversation and knowing that that the mover and seconder are not happy to make that as a simple, yeah. I think it's covered in number 7 as it is, and we will get a report and then we'll have the opportunity to add to it. Okay. All right.
Can I just ask a quick question as well of the staff?
No.
I have one issue, and I'm glad you withdrew your amendment because I want to add one now.
No, not allowed to.
No, he didn't move it.
He didn't move it.
Sorry, so we do have...
So we go to number 7.
No, because he never moved it.
He never moved it.
No, I'm getting governance.
Yours is denied, so we haven't had any amendment. Everything you just said was meaningless.
Sorry?
And grants wasn't accepted. No, nobody put it.
The amendment lapse, we have got one left. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. All right, Councillor.
Number 7, everything as is. Obviously 8 is gone.
Yes.
But number 7, where you've got review street parking and... I'll tell you what to put down. On the fly. I hate this doing it on the fly, but I feel this is important. I'll explain why in a minute. So review street parking and takes such action as council sees fit in dealing with any parking restrictions, yes. And continues to monitor traffic. I'm happy for that to go on. The reason I say that is if we're not going to close Oban tonight, one of the things that was very apparent was that The people that live on that street aren't getting their bins picked up because there's cars parked. And they're parked because you've got park and ride people and you've got people at local businesses. Now, there's no restricted parking on that street at the moment, and in a lot of ways having parking makes traffic on that street slower, because when there's cars, most people tend not to drive as fast. So getting rid of the cars can make traffic faster. However, I actually think it's very important that that street is as uncongested as it possibly can be for the safety of the people that live on it. So what I'd like administration to do when it's reviewing this is have a look at the parking. Have a look at whether we need to put some yellow lines down where people can't actually park their cars. Have a look at whether we need to put in resident restrictions so that only those people that live on that street can park their cars. Have a look at whether we need to put in 2-hour parking only, so that you don't get park and riders. Because I actually think that the more open a street is, the safer it is. You can see when you're backing out of your driveway because you're not looking around big trucks. You can see if you want to cross the road because you can actually see what's coming and what's just been. So I think parking is an issue that we've touched upon, but it's certainly for Oban, if it's not going to be closed, I really think we need to deal with it just so that those people have the amenity of where they live, that they can get their rubbish collected, that they can easily back out of their driveway, and that they can easily go and meet their neighbour across the road without being skittled by people that are doing rat runs. So I just feel that that's very, very important. So I would be happy for... Yes,
They're accepting it.
They're happy to take it on.
They're both accepting it.
There, that's good.
One
So
step
I
ahead.
think parking is one of those things in all those streets that we need to look at, as well as traffic. I, with many, don't believe that 40 kilometres is going to make much difference. You've got speed humps, they're narrow streets, they've got cars parked on them, and the people that actually speed on those streets take no notice of whether the sign says 40 or not. 40 is only for people that would never do 40 in those areas. I don't think it makes any difference whatsoever. But apart from that, I hope this gives the residents of those two streets some respite from what's going on, and I hope it leaves it safer for them.
Thank you for accepting that.
Did I not put that in?
Yeah, it's missing the word, and takes such action as council sees fit. That's fine. You did. Now, is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Jones.
I won't take long, but I think Councillor Pickett is right. I think we should close both roads and we should do it tonight. That's what the majority of the residents want. It's what the residents who've, come out on a, early spring, late winter's evening want. People have expressed similar views, so I think we should vote it down and vote for the alternative motion.
Don't forget there were 2 for and 1 against in those who spoke tonight. Residents who you were referring to. They were not all unanimous. Well, okay. All right. Okay. Councillor Dawes.
Yeah, this has been an hour, would you believe? Look, just a couple of good points. I took Councillor Hughes. This is a measured approach. I thought that was spot on. But when we've got 2 councillors who have spoken to residents and they've got a contingency clause number 7 in there to cater for, if this is not right, well, we might have to do a little bit more, then I think we should be supporting the ward councillors here. And I do take the point, we're not all traffic experts, although when we get to 11.4, Councillor Turnbull and I would like to be traffic experts there. But I just want to support the 2 ward councillors for what they have done so far to help us through this very difficult issue. So I will be supporting the motion.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
I have a question.
Question, Councillor Davis?
It's a question through you, Your Worship, of the administration. If the paragraph 37, I suppose, was, say if more residents were in favour of closure of the Oban, would council administration have supported closing Oban?
Through your worship, yes. Had it been much clearer at that stage, we would have recommended that to be the case.
Question. What was the statistics around that? So can we better understand?
I think they were mentioned earlier.
Oh, sorry, I missed that then. Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Hughes, you have a question too?
I was just going to ask if, obviously we've asked for the report to come back in March, but if something came up immediately after the road closure, would something come back to council earlier if it was required, or would, I'm assuming, staff also have the discretion to make decisions and make things happen if they're not working properly?
The wording is by the end of March, so
Yeah,
that indicates it could be soon.
But certainly through Madam Mayor, we'll have an active watching brief on this from the moment it's closed, and should we need to take action, whether we can take it as administration or whether something needs to come back to the chamber, it certainly will, post haste if it needs to.
Right, are you ready to vote? No, sorry, Councillor Davey, you wish have the opportunity to speak again. Apologies, but I was just really finding out if there's anyone else who wanted to speak. All right, Councillor.
Thank you. I'll be brief as possible. Thank you very much, everybody, for all your considered input. It's a very complex situation. We've got large arterial roads abutting part of a small inner city suburb with tiny streets, many homes, many cars parked, many cars driving through. And I think this, that we've crafted with your support, hopefully, this motion will start to manage this increasing traffic load. It's been proposed and supported by DIT. It's been heavily researched and worked on by our staff. It's supported by the residents of Thornbury Street. And I think we need to proceed with it now during this very large intersection upgrade. The residents are the ones who are bearing the brunt now, and it is considerable. So, closing Thornbury Street is a start. I agree it's probably desirable to close Oban Street or even possibly Verdun Street. But the work's been undertaken for us to consider and work on and decide on Thornbury Street tonight. And I think down the track we will have the opportunity and the information and the engineering and all the stats to decide how we can address the problem further. So hopefully you'll support this tonight. Thank you.
Right, I put it to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. this is where you're the expert, is it, Councillor Dawes?
Right. Okay, I mean, just... Oops, can someone let Councillor Hughes in, please? Actually,
Keep her out.
dear me. Okay, now we've got another traffic one, and I just want to move the officer's recommendation first of all. Right, so there's no change to that. I just want to keep up page 172 on your screen, which is what's being proposed here by the Department of Transport. Councillor Turnbull and I, we did have the benefit of looking at the draft design with Alan Harvey and David Hayes last week, and we went through the fine details of this particular intersection. As you know, it's had a number of traffic issues over the time, and a little bit like the Hughes crossing further down Greenhill Road, this one is likely to happen after the Hughes crossing is completed. But it's taken us 2.5 years to get to this stage, and we are pleased that it will be completely funded by the federal government. Now, the couple things here, you might say, well, we would have preferred lights, to be honest with you, but the cost of the lights is, well, according to our administration, 1.2 million. I think federal government would like to say it's 2 million. Yes, I don't know what they're made of, but anyhow, it is a very, very expensive proposition. Now, what they are providing here is a very interesting design, and they do call it, and you're wondering what is the seagull, and the seagull is that triangular bit which is facing Hallett Road. So there's one lane going to come up Hallett Road if you want to turn right, and it goes into a dedicated lane. So that could work. Our only concern is that the first street on the right before Hallett Road, you're on Hallett Road, is High Street, which goes down to the Burnside Primary School and crosses Lockwood Road. So there is a belief that because it's now down to one lane turning right, that line will be fairly long. And we have asked Alan and Dave to have a look at that with the designers, as to what effect the right-hand turn would have on High Street. Like, do we debar a right-hand turn during peak times or something like that? But that's something for the future. That's a contingency, all right? So at the moment, there's no mention of High Street anywhere on there. Councillor Turnbull would talk about the tree reserve, which is up the top there of Hallett Road and Greenhill Road. So we're hoping that if this gets passed tonight, construction starts in the new year, and then it can be called the Turnbull Dawes intersection. All right, but look, it is a big tick for us. It did take 2 and a bit years to get over the line. Would have preferred lights, but this could work. It's a little bit of theory involved. Let's see how it goes. Thank you.
And you wish to second it, Councillor Turnbull? And you're going to speak now?
But first, may I ask a question before speaking to it? My question comes, the design comes from the Department of Transport and Infrastructure. Has there been, or will there be, any community consultation with the nearby residents on how this will impact on them?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I can refer that to Mr. Cant.
Through your worship, didn't design this. We engaged independent traffic engineers Tonkins to assist with the design. It was approved by DIT, and as it's a significant black spot, and you'll actually you'll see this in the presentation we do with you with the city master plan coming up as well. The fact that it's been fully funded at the federal level recognises the significant safety issues that we have at this intersection. Because it's been designed with safety in mind and by an independent engineer, I wouldn't recommend any other consultation other than notification, but we'll do that notification early to the residents so they're fully aware of what's coming and when it will happen.
So following on from that, will the users of that intersection, 10,000 daily, have a chance to comment, obviously via social media? Because it's not always just the residents, it's going to impact on a lot of people coming through, 10,000 a day.
From what I understand, that they can comment all they like, but it's happening. Right? and my intent was to actually announce it in Burnside Highlights tomorrow as something that's positive because the feds are paying for it. We're not having to pay for it. I think that's brilliant. So we can thank them for this because without it, it would have been $141,000 that we would have had to find out of our pockets. So, yeah, of course we did all the work, but that quite often happens with government. So,
I understand that. I do understand that, but the fact is everything else has community consultation. Every other project...
Not in this case when it's black spot funding or these special funding projects, they often are not related to any kind of consultation at all. There's an assumption that there's a need. That need is then being looked at by the federal government or the state government, and then they determine if the need is necessary in terms of safety, in this case in terms of safety, and then the decision is made to fund it or not fund it. If they had chosen not to fund it, then there would be an indication that it was not necessary from their perspective as traffic engineers and as the government putting up the money. So it's a little bit different from a normal community consultation with this black spot funding,
Okay,
Councillor Turnbull. But please go on and finish what you have to say.
Yes, thank you. I'll speak to it now. I support the recommendation to accept the black spot funding, of course. To receive the full grant is very fantastic. Very important to us up in our area of Green Hill Road. That is quite a nasty intersection and been lots of crashes in the past. However, I'd like to go on a record concerning the proposed plans for the upgrading. As Councillor Dawes said, we had a briefing for this, and I'd like some assurances that the proposed plans will address some of the hazards. I'll go into the hazards in a moment, but I do note in the report it says that, where was it? Sorry, I've lost a little bit there. But the fact is that it says in the report that they will actually go back and check and sort of monitor it and make sure this plan works, because there are a few things there that really don't get solved. One of them at the moment is, at present there are two right-hand lanes in Hallett Road for vehicles turning right into Green Hill Road. At busy times, there are already long waiting times for the vehicles making this turn. The proposal to reduce the current two lanes to one could increase the waiting times. It may not be effective. The second one is a line of sight issue, and it's unclear how the proposed changes will address this. Vehicles travelling east up Green Hill Road and turning left into Hallett Road obstruct the view of the vehicles who are travelling east up the hill and travelling straight through the intersection. It's hard to see. Illegal parking in the left lane on Green Hill Road at clearway times needs more regulation. Vehicles ignore the clearway signs on a daily basis, and this contributes to problems and still will. And the left turn slip lane for vehicles travelling east on Green Hill Road and turning left into Hallett Road is very short. It needs to be much longer so to direct left turning vehicles into the slip lane earlier. But apart from that, we've been informed that the scrubby little island on the corner will also be upgraded, and Councillor Davey will be happy with that one, with new vegetation, especially underplantings, which is good news. So here's hoping that the proposed changes funded by the federal government will enhance this nasty little intersection. It's heartening to read that future analysis states that further reviews of the crash data, that's lovely, will be undertaken to determine the success of the project. And any significant impacts that may come from the intersection upgrade can be evaluated and action taken if necessary. So that would be good if that could be monitored all the time. Anything's better than what we have now. Traffic lights would have been wonderful. It we might be able to change the name of the intersection from Dice with Death to something more pleasant. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask a question in relation to the yellow lines that are on the map? I know one of those major hazards on that at that intersection is people who park their cars on the left-hand side of Hallett Road, just past the intersection of Green Hill Road. Does that yellow line represent yellow lines that will go on the road to stop parking, or is that being attended to in a different way?
Your Worship, no, those lines are just purely lane lines and curb lines, but certainly parking would be required to be banned further than what it currently is as part of this design, absolutely.
Thank you. I use this intersection lots, but I do cut down High Street quite frequently as well. So don't go putting a no right turn down High Street because it's on my way from my parents and my coffee shop. I am happy to support this. I think it is very nerve-wracking sitting at the top of Hallett Road, peering over Green Hill and putting your foot on that accelerator and hoping that there's no one that's going to jump out from either up the hill or coming towards you because visibility is very difficult. So I think this is a good solution. I note that it is a concept plan, so there could potentially be changes, I'm assuming, as part of a detailed design phase. But I think it's a good compromise for a tricky intersection. And I think once again we have to trust our traffic engineers and people with qualifications who are obviously putting forward great solutions to manage traffic within the community. So I'm very happy to support it as it stands.
Councillor Piggott.
Question, is it really $1 million for a set of lights at an intersection like that?
Through your Worship, DIT at a site meeting when we were evaluating options actually quoted $2 million. As an example, cost of lights at Sydney Street and Green Hill Road, just over here, was about 850,000, but that would be a simpler set of lights than what would be required at Green Hill and Hallett, purely because of the road widths and things like that. You'd need more poles, so hence the estimate of about 1.2 mil if council were to undertake the project. But as I said, DIT have quoted 2 mil. That seems a bit over the top, but yes.
I think that's why they don't want to do traffic lights at Green Hill Road and Glenburn Road intersection. Is they don't want to spend the money. They're spending it everywhere else. Councillor Hubel.
Thank you, Worship, and Nina Marnie all. Greet you all this evening. Look, 17-year-old Councillor Hubel learnt to hill start a Datsun Sunny at that intersection. So, you know, I don't know that much has been done to it since those days. So I think this is obviously a very welcome development. I also just want to acknowledge the work of, you know, our staff on this, particularly tonight, fielding a lot of things. Thank you for that. I think this is a great thing, and I'll be voting for it, obviously.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this matter? Otherwise, I shall go back to Councillor Dawes. Put it to the vote. All right, those in favour? Those against? Excellent. We need to, Councillor Cornish, 11.5, the establishment of a selection panel to appoint 2 independent members, if you wish this to go ahead now.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I suppose I'll be in the hands of the administration. Do you want me to... Page 190. Yeah, page 190, but did you want to try and get some councillors nominating first so we can fill in spots or have a vote?
So through you, Madam Mayor, I think the process, if council is happy with the concept they're proposing to this evening, which is essentially to bring forward the proposed changes to the Local Government Act around changing the balance of independents versus councillors on our audit panel, that is would be a prudent step. And so if we get some nominations. If there's two, that will make the process simple, but if there's more than two, we'll go to a ballot process.
Otherwise, we could do 1 to 3 and then 4.
Yeah, well, I'm happy.
No, this is a selection committee. So there's no one on it.
So, yeah, if I may, Madam Mayor, that's an important point just to clarify. Tonight is not about appointments to the committee. This is about appointments for the panel,
Yeah.
to select the independent members.
So, Councillor Hubel?
I just wanted to nominate Councillor Jones.
Right. Councillor Jones, do you accept the nomination? All right. Councillor Dawes? Councillor Piggott, do you accept the nomination? No, Councillor Piggott does not wish to accept it. Just for your query, currently the independents are Emma. I can't think. No, Emma. I can't think of her surname. Hinchy, of course. Emma Hinchy and David Powell are the two independents. Currently, the elected members are Councillor Piggott, Councillor Jones, and myself. But we've got one nomination, one not. Councillor Davey, are you nominating?
I'm happy to nominate. I've got the capacity, so.
Wish to nominate? Right, so you obviously accept it? Okay. Councillor Dawes?
Is the mayor automatically on this panel? I'll nominate the mayor.
Which does mean that there'll be an election.
No, because I don't think, wait, who's on the audit committee at the moment? Isn't Councillor Jones on the audit committee?
Yes, we both are.
Shouldn't we have people give
Desirable.
So you and me, Joan, how's that? Yeah. So I'll put my hand.
All right, I'll withdraw mine.
Withdraw your nomination.
You don't feel that you are required to withdraw? There's no conflict of interest, is there, whatsoever?
Well, Grant and I were on the panel that chose the chairman.
Yeah.
And we were both on the.
Yeah, I think I was too. Yeah. Okay. So, Councillor Hughes?
I was going to nominate Councillor Dawes.
Right. Councillor Dawes, would you accept the nomination?
It's like a potato, no one wants.
I really think it should be someone with a bit of financial experience. I will decline.
I'll
Councillor
nominate
Hughes?
Councillor Lemon then.
Okay. Sorry, at the moment we have Councillor Davey and Councillor Lemon who have self-nominated, and is there anyone else who wishes to nominate or be nominated? Hang on, I've got Councillor Piggott first.
Sorry, just to clarify, Madam Mayor, according to my records, I have Councillor Jones, Councillor Davey, Councillor Lemon and Councillor Monceau.
No, I've withdrawn mine.
Okay, so I have three.
Yeah.
I actually have a question. Can I just clarify the change in the terms of reference tonight, the amendment? Can I just clarify that effectively reduces by 1 the amount of elected members that will be on it after December, or as of now?
No.
Firstly, after clarify that it's 1 less elected member going forward.
Yep. Through Madam Mayor, just to clarify, that is correct. It is to reduce the elected members by 1 to come in line with the changes to the Local Government Act. Now, this is bringing him in earlier than is necessary, just to be clear. Sorry, that's to answer your question. And when they come into effect, for the elected members, they come in, it would come into effect, if this goes through this evening, for the elected members to come into effect from the late November election process.
Right, so at the moment we have Councillor Jones, Councillor Lemon and Councillor Davey having nominated.
Can we nominate all three?
Who from administration's on the panel?
I would hope Mr Cooper and the CEO.
Okay.
Would that be correct?
I'll move to insert all three names in there if we can. And we'll just move the motion.
Sorry?
What's wrong
I was just looking for expediency for tonight, but
I'm just a bit concerned that elected members actually outweigh the administration in this particular situation, but then maybe I shouldn't be concerned about that.
They did on the CEO appointment.
Sorry?
Doesn't make right.
You're correct. The CEO appointment is different because the CEO appointment, that is the only appointment we make as a council.
You don't have to explain yourself.
Okay. No, but I'm explaining others. So,
an election? You want an election? Sorry, I'm getting the vibe that we need an election.
all right. We have 3 nominations, so we've got some pieces of paper ready.
So, a spiel. I nominated because I think I've got the time. It's probably out of business hours. I was just nominating to pitch in and do my bit and help out.
I was nominated by Councillor Hubel. I'm a member of the Audit Committee. I think it would be useful to have a member of the Audit Committee on the interviewing panel. I've got financial experience. We're probably going to want people with finance and risk experience, so that's why I've put myself forward.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Now, Councillor Lepp.
I'm an old hand at interviewing panels, and in fact, I've been on every interviewing panel except for the Audit Committee. But I do have some experience in this area, surprisingly, and it surprises myself. I actually worked for the Department of Treasury and Finance for 5 years, and I learnt a lot more than I ever cared to, and sadly haven't forgotten any of it. So I think that actually makes me pretty good in terms of looking at what sort of people should be on high-level boards. And in fact, I've known quite a few of the people that have been on Burnside boards because I've worked with them at DTF. So I hope you vote for me.
Thank you very much. Now we have a piece of paper with one name.
So just
Oh,
to be
you give
clear,
the draft.
just to
You
be
give
clear,
the
Madam Mayor, I'd ask the members to place 2 names
2 names.
on that paper. Thank you.
Councillor Jones, Councillor Lemon with a pretty flower. Oh no, actually, for consistency, I should tell you that I've got a dog, I think a cat and a tree on the first one. It's a kangaroo. Oh, true. Yes, that could be a kangaroo. Jones, Davey. With no pretty pictures. Jones, Davey. Councillor Jones, Councillor Davey. Councillor Davey, Councillor Lemon. Councillor Davey, Councillor Lemon. Councillor Jones, Councillor Davey. With a smiley face. Councillor Lemon, Councillor Davey. Councillor Davey and Councillor Lemon. Councillor Jones, Councillor Davey. Councillor Lemon, Councillor Davey. Yes, that's correct. So I'll pleased to declare it is Councillor Davey and Councillor Lemon. So the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11. Councillor Davey 11, Councillor Lemon 7, Councillor Jones 6.
Pretty close. All right, thank you. Now we can insert those two names into your motion, Councillor Cornish.
And I'll move the motion.
All right, and I need a seconder for the motion. Thank you, Councillor Davey. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on this now? No one? All right, then I will put it back to you, Councillor Cornish. Can I put it to the vote? All right, so I shall put this now to the vote. All those in favour? Carried. Can I suggest that we have a break now, because we've got the motion on notice and the confidential to do after that, and I don't want us to. I think there are certain people who would like to have a bit of a break right now. Seems to be a sensible time. And are you all happy with that? Those in favour, have a break now for 10 minutes. It's 8:58, so we'll start again at 8:68. 8 minutes past 8. Right, we're restarting the meeting then now, and we are moving to the motion on notice, which is on page 269. You have received already the answers to the questions on notice. So the motion on notice comes from Councillor Carbone. So when you're ready, Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move in accordance with what was printed in the agenda, and I'm optimistic this might be another positive story for Council highlights tomorrow, Your Worship. In speaking to this motion, as you are all aware, I took a very firm policy to the last council election, which was for council to do all it could to crack down on derelict properties. More often than not, there's discussion around what we can't do, and there's a lot that we can't do. But there are some things that we can do, and I'd like to focus our attention on those. Generally speaking, derelict properties affect neighbouring owners. They bring down the sense of community morale and affect property values. So it affects them emotionally and it affects them financially as well. The property in Eastwood has been on the radar for some time, and in no way, shape or form is it acceptable to anyone in the street and in the suburb. It is an utter disgrace to those who are aware of it. It's been in this state, more or less, for the best part of the last 40 years. I thought it was 30 years, but I was advised today by a resident it's actually more like 40 years. So that is an absolute joke and a disgrace. And it requires absolute urgent action in one way, shape or another. We cannot be soft on this type of behaviour. We need to send a very clear and loud message that we will not tolerate this type of activity. And regardless of, even if it's a small initiative that we're trying to get off the ground, it all counts and all makes a difference. In relation to this specific example, Matilda Lane was reopened, as we all know, and this back fence did back onto the neighbouring property. Once we opened Matilda Lane, this fence fell over and it exposed the true state of what was hiding behind it. It is overgrown, it is unsightly, there's building materials and all sorts of rubbish that's built up over the last 40 years. Eastern Health have done everything they can, and now it's for us to step up and do what we can. I realise it's not in keeping with council policy, but this is a very unique example because of the reopening of Matilda Lane. We created an open community space where there wasn't a community space before. The problem with this property is, apart from its unsightliness, it is becoming dangerous. It is fully exposed to children and squatters. I say we do what we can legally and we send him the bill for 50%. Thank you, Your Worship.
I seek a seconder. Councillor Jones, you wish to speak now or withhold your...
No, I'll yeah.
Did you say you wanted to speak now or you... Oh, you withhold. Oh, okay, sorry. Councillor Davey.
I have a couple of questions. Are there any rates owing on these properties? And the other question is, what are the implications for other property owners if we set a precedent for management of this problem in this way with fencing?
Through Madam Mayor, I'll refer the first part of the question to Mr Cooper.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, as I understand, there are no rates outstanding on these properties. They're all paid up to date.
Through Madam Mayor, with regards to the second part of the question, to my mind,
if the decision is made with the specifics around the opening of the lane, and that was a very particular reason why council made this consideration, I think I could defend the case that it wouldn't present a precedence going forward. However, people may try to use it as a precedence.
Can I just say, to clarify then, the fence came down because it was deteriorated and it just fell down when the lane was opened up, was it? Or did it get pushed down, or do we know? Okay.
Mr. Cooper? Thank you. Through the Mayor, we received a complaint from a neighbour back in April of this year, and it was reported that the neighbour heard a loud bang and understands that one of the other residents' truck was in the lane, so it could have been as a result of that truck moving around, but the fence was clearly in a state of disrepair as well.
Couple of questions. Administration, what have we done in regard to discussions with the landowner in regard to this? Can you fill me into what's perhaps happened so far before we've come to this point to try and get it sorted out?
Through the Mayor, there's a fair bit of history between council and this particular property owner. We've had discussions and negotiations to make sure the derelict properties are secure, to make sure nobody can enter those properties, and the owner has complied with that. Most years we have reason to take action under the Fire and Emergency Services Act to ensure that the vegetation at the front of those properties is under control, so it doesn't become a fire hazard. Again, we've had compliance from the resident at that stage. We haven't had specific discussions around the replacement of the fence, but when the complaint was made, our officers did go and attend the site and were able to confirm that it didn't present a safety issue. Whilst there is a shed, an old shed on the property, and it's overgrown, there wasn't enough there to cause council to raise an order. From a safety perspective, our officers are also mindful that we're coming up to the bushfire season again, so we'll be monitoring the overgrown vegetation in the backyard to see whether another order is required to keep that vegetation clear. So other than that, we haven't had any direct conversations around the status of the replacement of the fence.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question, if I can, in relation to item 2 on the motion, with exercise its powers under the Fences Act. I just did a bit of a search on the Fences Act, and subsection 20 of the Act, when it's applied to Crown and Council, says that the Act does not apply in respect to any such land, and one of them is public roads or road reserves. So can I just understand, and I know an Act is a very long document, and one little section, you shouldn't ever read it in one bit, but I just want to understand the entire concept of what our powers are under that Act in relation to this motion. Thanks.
Section 20, subsection 2, does exempt council from having any financial responsibility for paying for a fence alongside a public road, and Matilda Lane is a public road. So in terms of council taking action, there's no obligation on us to do anything with regards to that replacement fence. There are no obligations on council to do so. So if we decide to do so ourselves, we do have the ability under the Act to seek a contribution, and in this case it will be 50%, from the owner of that property, on the basis that the owner of the property would gain some benefit from the replacement of that fence. And we would basically do that by securing an order through the Magistrates' Court to seek a financial contribution in the event that the owner didn't volunteer that contribution when first negotiated.
Davey, I think you had your hand up. Would you for a question? No? Councillor Lemon? outdoors and then...
I have a question. In our dealings with this owner, when we've got in touch with him in the past, has he complied to our directions? Or she?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, yes, I understand that he has complied. All of the requirements have been undertaken. But just to expand on that, there has been a question in terms of whether the owner is likely to pay for the fence or contribute. And from the dealings that our staff have had with that particular owner, the feeling is that that payment wouldn't be forthcoming.
You don't mind? Was that owner was one that agitated to have that lane opened, was he not? My recollection is he was.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, yes, he was one of the residents that wanted the lane open because if you recall, that owner had what would have been a landlocked parcel of land had the lane not been reopened.
Do you have to fence your backyard? Because you don't have to fence your front yard. Do you have to fence your backyard?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, no, you don't.
Right.
Thank you. Do we have any legislation under which we can compel him to put a fence up in that spot?
Through the Mayor, the legislation is the Fences Act, 1975. My understanding is we can only ask for a contribution. We can't do the whole thing.
Councillor Davis?
In terms of overhanging, like encroachments from overhanging trees, have we actually taken a complaint to the resident and have they complied with any of those requests?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, I don't believe we've had any issues with overhanging vegetation. If we have, then we've obviously got a policy position on that and we could take action under that. But I don't believe that's been the case. I only believe we've taken action under the Fire and Emergency Services Act.
Can I speak to the motion? Yes. I'll absolutely speak against this. I think that's pretty damn clear from the questions that we've had. There's no issues with overhanging vegetation. So the idea of point 1 is a complete waste of time. And if we do have issues with overhanging legislation, then it absolutely shouldn't come through council. We should deal with that directly with the resident. Second of all, Eastern Health Authority has been contacted, and they've looked at the property, and Eastern Health Authority have done everything that they need to, and there's certainly no indication that I have before me that there is any kind of, health and safety issue before us. That's not what's being proposed here, and they've gone and assessed the property. The property is assessed as not being dangerous, and the resident has complied with our previous security requests. The last thing is you don't have to fence your backyard. So this is a council laneway. We don't have to compel a resident to fence their backyard, and in many cases, as we've seen along the riverways, essentially in our council, they're unfenced. And that probably, I think even if it was fenced, it probably would be quite a dreary looking backyard. I mean, if you actually have a look at the photos that Councillor Carbone's sent around, the guy's got long grass and he's got some junk there. He's got some long grasses, he's got some junk. Apart from that, this seems just to be a witch hunt. And I think going to this kind of level is totally uncharacteristic of really what type of action we should be taking here. So from what I can see is the property is not derelict. It might be, my understanding is that the owner has complied, they pay the council rate, they've complied with the security requests. If there are complaints behind the scenes, then my understanding is, as far as we're aware, the administration is that this owner is complying with all of those things. So I think dragging an individual through council, and this is obviously being live cast on the internet, and we saw an article in breach of our media policy today, naming and shaming this resident who's actually complying with all of his regulations and all of his requirements. I think that's a really poor form, and I would welcome, another. We have continuing disobedience to our current media policy under section 5.10 in terms of talking to the media before a motion even comes to council. So I see nothing in this. Have a look at the photos. Yes, there's junk. Yes, there's long grass. They're complying with everything we're asking them to do. Why the hell is this a motion here? And I think it's outrageous that it actually makes it this far. So no, I won't be supporting the motion.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I have a question. There's two properties involved, I believe. Are either of them tenanted? And if not, are there squatters in them? And has council reported them to the MFS? Because if there's issues about hoarding and blocking of obstructing access to houses, the MFS, I think, have got powers in terms of being able to enter properties, which they quite stringently enforce, because they might have to enter to rescue people. So it's a matter of caring for their personnel. Have we involved them at all?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm reasonably assured this isn't an issue of hoarding to the properties. I know the MFS get involved if they believe they can't get access to the house. I don't think that's the case in this matter, but I'll refer the first part of the question to Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, through the Mayor. To my knowledge, the properties aren't tenanted. They are just empty, which is the reason why we asked for those to be made secure, because prior to that they weren't. So on that basis, I'd say no, they're just empty properties.
Councillor Hubel.
Thank you, Worship. I will have another one after, but I'll start with a question about part 3, which refers to 83 Main Street. Now, just looking at the map here, we've got 77 to 79 as a property, and that is this picture here. Is this right? Is this 77 to 79? This is the back of 76. Yeah. And then we have 81. But then when we have part 3 of this motion, then talks to 83. So it seems, looking at the map, that we're looking at putting fencing along the entire western edge of Matilda Lane. And in one of these photos, it seems that it's just 77 to 79 that needs the new fence. So other than the mover, is someone in administration able to comment on that part of things? Because it seems to me that just 77 to 79 needs any attention at all.
Thank you, through the Mayor. I believe it was just to ensure consistent materials and improve the overall aesthetics. So on the basis that the back end of that lane were going to be, the proposal was to put fencing in there, then why not make sure the whole of that side of the lane was consistent and offer the same deal, as it were, to the other neighbours. The owner of 81 is obviously the same as the owner of 79 and 77, but the owner of 83 is different.
Councillor Jones, you were next.
I think I'd like to speak to the motion. Look, I'm going to support this, and the reason I support this is I think there's a precedent, and that precedent is May Terrace in Kensington Park, where we own the cottages on May Terrace adjacent to the Regal Theatre, and the residents came to us and said, we don't really like the neighbourhood fence, could you put up a heritage fence because it's more in keeping with the area? And we said, well, you've come to us neighbours and we agree. And we put in a 13-metre fence costing $12,000. We didn't have to, it was on our property. But the neighbours came to us and said, the fence has been an eyesore, it's out of character with the street. And we said, OK, yeah, no, we agree with you. And we spent $13,000 on a 12-metre fence. And so I really don't see, if we're doing that for the people of Kensington Park, why we shouldn't do it for the people of Eastwood, where they're getting 70 metres of fence for under 50% of the cost, because they're just getting a normal good neighbourhood fence. So I think there's an issue of equity here, and what we should do for people in one part of Burnside, we should do for people in another part of Burnside, and $5,000, it seems quite reasonable to me. So I'll be voting in favour of the motion.
Councillor Piggott, you're next.
Couple of questions if I can, but first, try the first one, I guess. This probably is an issue for the neighbours. The question to administration is, if this is not the solution, what is the solution? Do we have a solution? Do we have any other levers we can pull?
Through Madam Mayor, I think I'm just interpreting the the body language from Mr. Keeper. In all seriousness, we've explored our other options, and essentially there's not many levers to pull. The one we've addressed is the public health issue, and EHA are satisfied there isn't one. The issue is, one of a slight eyesore, but that's not a public health risk. And the issues of overgrown vegetation, we've got some legislation that will enable us to deal with that. But in short, the answer is no. There's nothing else we can do here.
Thank you. Could I have a supplementary question? So then can I clarify then on this solution? There's 2 fences. Thank you for Councillor Hubel assisting me with that, with his question. Was I right in understanding that we do, under the Fences Act, have the ability not to make this person put a fence up, but we could make him contribute to the cost? We have the legislative ability. So we couldn't make him pay 100% of the cost, but we could make him pay part of the cost. Is there a maximum when it goes from one that we can to no that we can't? As a percentage? 50%
is the peak figure.
So we've got the ability to force this guy to pay 50% of that fence. And then the point 3 is the next neighbour, who is saying, we are going to put that fence up to if you're willing to pay 50% of it. Is that your understanding of it? Thank you.
Yeah, I have another question. The fence in May Terrace, that was owned by a resident? So that when Councillor Jones was talking about precedent, that was a fence that was owned by a resident and we paid for half of it? Is that right?
Through your worship, the property at May Terrace, the subject of the fence, is owned by council.
Councillor Davey, you have a question?
Thank you.
Or you wish to speak?
No, I have a question. Is there anything else we can bring in? Because this isn't an isolated... I sympathise with Councillor Carbone, because we're having issues from time to time about fencing, whether it's on adjacent to reserves, along laneways, and these sort of issues. Is there any possibility of us enacting a bylaw or any sort of policy which would enable us to have more weight to get people to comply with putting a fence up?
I may need to answer that with a question. Depends on the purpose of the fence. So in this case, we're talking about the purpose is to, I think, protect the view from unsightly property. Is that the nature of your thought, or are you just suggesting we should have the power to force people to put fences up where we think they should?
It's for where fences are put up for a range of reasons. To protect one, separate one area from another, protect some areas, fence around the pool, fence around Wansley, for your own privacy. But I guess this is when it's in the public interest, how we can generate something to give us some power.
Yeah. I might refer to Mr. Cooper just to share with us if there's anything under planning, in the planning system that gives us any ability.
I must admit, I was thinking the same thing, because if a property was left to go to rack and ruin, potentially because they want to demolish it eventually, does that mean that it has to be fenced to make it look better? Whether it be back fence, side fence or front fence? I'm curious as well the answer, so.
Thank you. So, through the Mayor, we have the ability under current legislation, whether it's the Fences Act or through the Fire and Emergency Services Act, or as a result of a safety order, to address all of those things.
That's it.
But those things will not address how a property looks. If it goes into disrepair, if it just looks terrible, there's nothing there that we can do. That's the private owner's choice to let their property do that. What we can do is where there's a safety issue to the public, or we decide that we do want to put a fence up, where it's partly our responsibility, we can get that contribution. And again, we can insist on vegetation and weeds being kept under control. But we cannot make any changes to a resident who lets their property go to rack and ruin. We just can't do that under local government legislation or any other, to my knowledge.
Councillor Lemon, you were next.
Thank you, and I have a question also. Given that we could in fact put up a fence and then send the bill, do we compel the owner? Is the owner then compelled to pay for a portion of that cost?
Through my understanding is they do become compelled, and if they refuse to pay, Mr. Cooper, it becomes a charge on the land?
I'd have to check that one, but the legal process to do that is, as I said, to obtain an order through the Magistrates Court, and it's all based around what is a fair contribution to that fence. So it puts a value on the benefit or the perceived benefit the owner is getting of that fence being put up. So in most cases, it would be the 50% as in this case. So if it will be subject to enforcement through the Magistrates Court.
Councillor Turnbull.
Oh, I'd like to have a supplementary to that if I might.
All right. I've got two others waiting, that's all.
So given that we would then have to go to the Magistrates Court, potentially before or after we put up a fence, and given the answer that's just been made, that there is actually nothing dangerous, there's no health issues, there's no vermin issues, there's no danger issues, there's no overhanging issues from this place, what leg do we have to stand on to compel this person to build a fence that by our own laws tell us you don't have to have at your back door?
Through the Mayor, exactly the same as I just said. So under the Fences Act, we can request a contribution towards the fence. If we decide to put one up, under the Fences Act gives council the ability to go and seek that financial contribution.
But my point is, if we decided to put one up without any good grounds, we could be challenged.
Not challenged that way, but this is a council decision. What the administration is saying, there are no other grounds for us to do that.
You don't have to have grounds to put up a fence, agreed grounds. I think that's what Mr. Cooper is talking about. Okay, next person is Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Mayor. I would hate to look at this every day. I hate to live near it. And to say it's not a safety issue, you can practically see the little rats peering out of there. It's horrible. And also, it does need trimming. You can see from that tree, the overhanging branches need to be done as well. For the people in the area, I think we should pay half. Fencing is half and half. Anybody who's put a fence up with their neighbour, no, you pay half, they pay half. Okay, we might lose, but for $5,152, which is in council terms is small change, I think we should do it for the residents of the area to sort of make it look better. It doesn't look very Burnside-y, does it? And I think we should do it, so I'll be voting for it.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Worship.
A question or speaking?
I do have a question of the administration in relation to, is this block of land possibly required for the construction of any community wastewater management system, or is it required for us to prevent any floods or some flood mitigation where we could compulsorily acquire this block of land?
I figured at best I'd have to say that I notice, but my first thought is probably not.
Okay, now I don't believe I have any more lined up questions. Councillor Hubel? Speaking or asking questions?
I want to do both, but I'll ask a question first. I'm curious about, and again, this might be something that the mover needs to address, but administration, you might have some insight on this. I'm curious about the squatters that was brought up, and I'm just wondering, up until the last couple of months, this has obviously been an enclosed piece of land. I'm just wondering whether are we aware, or how are we aware of the presence of squatters on this property that we're looking at, given that it used to be enclosed? And I'm just wondering whether us putting a fence up would actually make any difference, given that there used to be a fence, and if there were squatters when there was a fence, if we put a fence up, there'll still be squatters, given that this fence has only been down for a very short period of time. And this is essentially almost a very brand new problem. So I'm just wondering if the administration can comment on that. And I guess if they can't, I'd ask the mover to address that issue, please.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, I don't believe there has been an issue with squatters. I believe that the action that was taken to insist that the properties were secured was to prevent the possibility of squatters and also any harm that could come to those squatters if they actually got into the premise. So I'm not aware that squatters have been an issue in the past. And now that the properties are secure, I don't believe that the fact that the fence is down will make any difference as to whether it becomes a future target for squatters. And again, if the properties are secure, presumably they wouldn't be able to get in either. The safety order was more about, is there a danger of a small child or somebody injuring themselves by inadvertently going into that property? And that's what our officers have assessed is not a risk, or certainly not enough of a risk to warrant an order being issued.
Now or wait? I have got another person who wishes to ask a question, so if you want to wait. Councillor Davey, you have another question, or do you wish to speak?
Well, we'll ask a question. If squatters didn't know about the property before, they will now that it's splashed all over the advertising.
Good job.
But I just wonder, are these heritage listed properties, or do they have any sort of status at all in a heritage zone?
Through your worship, and I'm trying to recall the previous discussions we had on this matter, I believe that 2 of them are locally heritage listed, but we'll have to confirm that and take that on notice.
Piggott.
Can I crack at another amendment, if I may? Can I, the first part would be to introduce a new number 1, and that would be to authorise the Chief Executive to, 1, engage with the owner of 77 to 79 and 81 Main Street, Eastwood, to arrange their voluntary addressing of the issues surrounding their properties. And if I was to drop number 3, would that knock it out as an amendment? The previous number 3. Sorry, and then after 1, so 1, comma, and should it remain necessary, exercise its powers 1 and 2. Does that make sense? So I just feel there should be a crack at this guy does seem to have come to heel a bit when we've talked to him previously, albeit with perhaps legislative pressures. So that would be good if we could do that. But if we can't, I feel we...
Accept that as a variation. I don't have to propose it. So we're just essentially asking him first, and then we'll go ahead if he says no.
Yeah, but I do want to drop number 3 as well. It wasn't a question for them, it was a question for administration.
Okay.
I wasn't after variation.
Fair enough, but if they are considering just accepting it as
Oh, okay.
then it's fair enough for the comment to be made.
Yep, okay. Should it remain necessary, it needs to sit in front of number 2 and number 3.
It's not necessary now.
So, are there issues in relation to governance in terms
Should it be necessary? Are you happy with that?
or could it
Not
be
remain?
accepted
It's not
as
necessary now.
variation?
No, I understand, but if I say be necessary.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, the insertion of 1 would be an amendment. If 3 remains, if 3 is removed, then that would be an alternate motion.
Okay. 3 remains, but I do need, I think, should it be necessary? Basically what I'm saying is engage with this guy, see if we can sort this out on a voluntary basis, because otherwise we're going to do it and send you 50% of the bill.
I'm happy to accept that.
Okay. Well, then I'll speak to it. Yep.
And already Councillor Jones has said okay.
Thank you. Well, it's only a small change. I suppose I'm a little iffy about buying the next door fence, but at the risk of, I think overall, I'm with Councillor Turnbull. It's the sort of thing, and we do have limited powers as council, and it frustrates the hell out of us. But this is a problem that people expect councils to be able to solve. And okay, it may not be as big a problem, and it's specific to Matilda Lane, which is a lane that up until quite recently no one went down. But I do think it is something that council should use the powers it has, even if it does cost it money, to try and address. And in fact, this one is one of those things I think that doesn't have an open-ended sort of legal massive bill to it. It probably is throwing $5 grand to it, and we get the fence up, which does actually sort out to most of our ratepayers the problem. And so I think from that point of view, it's actually quite a neat solution. In regard to precedent, I don't feel we should be ruled by precedent. I don't accept, even though he perhaps is having to agree with me, the precedent around May Terrace I don't think works in favour of it. So I'm not making that as an argument at all. And I don't think this automatically pushes the button on every similar situation around the city. But then equally, I wouldn't say that it stops other situations being addressed like this as well. And I do think it is like I was saying before, I think it is something that if you went out and asked people in the street, should the council be able to fix this? They'd say, yes, absolutely. Okay, what have they got available to them? Well, actually not much, unfortunately, very little. One possibility would be spend the money and send the guy 50% bill. And I don't think that's an unreasonable solution. So I feel that motion should be supported.
Through Madam Mayor, can I just seek some clarification in terms of me implementing this motion? Addressing the issues, what does that look like?
More specific.
No. I just need to hear what's your mind, Councillor Piggott.
Well, the issues were the overhanging. I better look at this motion actually. Do we still have 2 and we had previously 1, 2 and 3, didn't we? Exercises powers under the Local Government Act as well, and there's number 2, there should be 4.
There is no overhanging vegetation.
What's the overhanging vegetation?
There isn't any.
Do I need to get this from my left-hand side?
Absolutely.
No, you shouldn't be getting it.
Can you answer it?
There does not appear to be any overhanging vegetation into the street at all, or across to the next door. If there is over to the neighbour on the side of the dwelling, then that could be, of course, if it's overhanging their property, depending on which property you're on, something could be done, but that's pending the location of the tree and where it overhangs, but certainly not onto the street. It doesn't appear that way.
Understand. So could I clarify, what I was looking to do is put in a number 1, but keep all the rest, but we've actually lost the previous number 1, and I don't want to lose the previous number 1. Please. And if it's not an issue, then should it be necessary, clearly takes that out as an issue. Can I just clarify with the Chief Executive? He's asking me about what I mean by addressing issues. Do you want me to be more specific in the motion?
No. And if you're, if you're inserting that, that really clears it up for me. Sorry. Should be necessary to removal of the overhanging vegetation and fencing encroachments. Just please bear with me, Madam Mayor.
Certainly.
Isn't it in relation to the slashing of grass, tidying up the building materials and rubbish, etc.? Isn't that what we're talking about?
The visual amenity of the property, I think, from the public domain is the main issue, which would include overhanging vegetation if it's valid.
But once the fence is up, there's nobody going to see the grass in the backyard anymore.
Yeah.
And then until it becomes a health or a fire hazard.
Yeah, but in essence you're saying, if I may, Madam Mayor, if we can get that cleaned up to our satisfaction, there is no need to pursue to the next step.
That's
with
exactly
the fencing.
right, yeah.
I'm clear now.
And if I could, I'd start to be pedantic, but I do think after number 1 it should say comma and, should it be necessary, and then 2, 3 and 4 follow after that. They don't all have should it be necessary. Because there is only one decision. You either sort it out with the guy or you kick all the next 3 in.
No, I certainly understand the intent.
Can I get those words? Yeah, and probably. And then the others follow on, and perhaps they need to be 1A, Bs and Cs, I don't know.
Start with a verb in each one.
Yeah, that's it. And just rounding that out, I suppose that is the core of it. That is the core of it. I think I'd like to see the persuasive powers of council at work first, and if they do, of administration I should say, if they do, that's great. If not though, I feel setting him loose on the motion as it originally started is not unreasonable, and it probably gives them a bit of negotiating power when they talk to him. I think this is the way we should go. Why doesn't Councillor Davis speak?
Yes.
You just had like 40 minutes.
Okay. Now, are you both happy with those variations that have been made? I want to confirm that first. Great. Okay. So we don't need a seconder. We can continue with the debate, and I think Councillor Hughes has been waving around there for quite a while.
I just wanted to ask a question of staff. So 1.3, there is a current fence that's in reasonable condition. So we're essentially just going and saying, oh, do you want to match the fence to run it all the way?
If you want to pay up, we'll do a new one that matches.
Yeah. But there's no actual physical need to replace the fence on 83.
That 83 is in with free fence. Half of free new fence. That's ridiculous.
Does this also warrant, of course, an agreement with the kind of fence that's going to go up? Because that's usually what is decided when two neighbours going to put up a fence.
No, no. Yeah, if you may remember now, I wouldn't get too hung up on that. I think
Okay,
a fence,
it's just part of
the fence will just be in keeping with the run that's there. We'll work that through.
Okay.
I just,
Have you got any other questions?
I totally understand the intent of this. I do have a minor concern about in whose opinion the matter's been satisfactorily dealt with.
The legal opinion.
No. So that's what it currently looks like. Now just assume we get some of the bits and pieces removed. My officers might look at it and go, yep, that's 80% better, we've achieved an outcome. The resident might look at it, other residents might look at it and go, no, it's still derelict. Other people in this room may not agree that we've resolved it. I'm happy to run with this, but there's just a little bit of ambiguity in what resolve looks like. So we'll do it to the best of our ability, but just be aware that we may end up with a conversation at some point that we have or haven't, that's all. Just to put that out there, that's all.
Right, Councillor Lemon and then Councillor Hughes.
I'll speak to the motion now. I'll speak to the motion. I actually have quite a few issues with this, given that this lane didn't exist until, I don't know, was it the beginning of this year or the end of last year?
In an open state.
The lane was encroached upon by the residents of Matilda Street. So the residents of Matilda Street, we forced them to retreat to their boundaries. Presumably they put up new fences. And now you've got a laneway that's 2 metres wide that nobody ever went along because the resident at the end of Matilda Street had put bollards up so nobody could actually drive a car and it, for all intents and purposes, was a private lane. And now we have these residents now saying that it's an eyesore, that the fence has fallen down, which doesn't surprise me because they're all leaning against each other and you don't have to have a back fence. So I've got a bit of an issue with where this has all come from, but I don't dispute that when you're standing on your back veranda, you don't want to look at ugly, and I get that. My problems are that I think stampeding to you've got to put a fence up and we're going to pay 50% of it is a bit much. What if the person that owns this really, really hates what we're doing? What if they don't want the fence to go up because there's a landlocked piece of land and they've got a legal right to be able to access that from the laneway? These are things we haven't actually thought about tonight, and they are things we really should be thinking about. The other issue I've got is this particular motion as it sits now says that our administration should go off and have a chat with the landowner and make some sort of judgment about whether the outcome is good enough, and if they decide it isn't, we're telling them to exercise their powers under several acts. We're also saying to the owners of 83 Main Street, you've got a perfectly good back fence, but the people on the other side of the lane actually want to look at something pretty, so we're just going to give you half a free fence so it all is the same, which I think is wrong too. If we go down this path, I'd like this to come back to council, and I'd like us to instruct administration about what they do next. I'd like them to come back with a report to say, this is what we've done, this is what we've discovered, this is what has been made clear to us in terms of what our capacity is, and this is the likely response we're going to get from the current landowner. I'd like that to happen beforehand. So I don't think I can support this as it sits because I think it's too prescriptive and it sets us down a path that I think we ought not go.
Right, Councillor Hughes.
Just wanted to confirm, this is referring just to the side fence on Matilda Lane, that have no properties facing it. It's not the front fence of the property at all. No.
CEO, can I
Just
ask
want
a
to
question
confirm,
for
just
councillor?
it's, yeah.
So, through Madam Mayor, this is the fence that runs along the lane at the rear of the properties.
Which is the back fence, the rear fence of these properties. Next one is councillor Hubel.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I will speak to this now. I want to just acknowledge the proactive approach by Councillor Carbone. Things feel like they might be sitting in a bit of limbo at the moment, but I think regardless, we're actively talking about this, so action is happening. Either way, look, I was really unsure about whether this was the best process. It is an unusual situation. Councillor Hughes just touched on one of the points that I really wanted to make, is that this is a landlocked property. There is no access from Main Street. And what we're looking at in these photographs is, for intents and purposes, the front fence. It's not by title, it's still a Main Street property, but this is the only way of getting to it. So that was sitting weirdly with me as well. And look, once upon a time, I did do some legal study, and I was thinking about the causal chain. Up until we opened the lane, this property was just sitting in isolation, being fine and not hurting anyone. No one could see the rubbish in it. No one could get to the rubbish in it. This problem is presented to us because the lane was closed, everything was fine. We opened it, it fell / might have been knocked by a truck. But we're now presented with a problem we didn't have before that has stemmed from a decision we made. Now, that causal chain may have some weak links in it, but I think we can't deny that the owner of this property had no problems until that lane was opened. This is not a common situation, but Councillor Piggott's alternative, asking for the owner action first, I think is the right way. This is a new problem, and this is not, there's talk of decades of neglect, sure, well and good, but the situation we're being faced with right now is new, months old, and I think given the attention this issue's received at this meeting, I think may or may not spring the owner into action, but I think it is common sense to do this. Now, maybe there's not imminent risk, but you look at that and I'd go, there's no way I want my kids in that at all. So I will support this motion as it is. It's an unusual situation. I don't think we need to be holding ourselves to precedent for blocking up or fencing things we don't like, but let's see where this goes.
Councillor Davis, you have a question?
Is it not the case that this is the front fence of that title block?
Through the Mayor, yes, that's correct. Technically, that would be the front fence. It's the only access into that parcel of land.
Can council force a property to block off the front fence of any house?
No, the short answer is no, we can't.
So given this is the front fence of that property and it's only access to a road, are you sure that under the Fences Act we can compel them to block it off?
If this is their front fence and we want to achieve a fence, if that's the final outcome, we can't tidy it up, we'd have to make sure it was installed with gates to ensure at least a vehicular access into the property.
Councillor Hughes, you got another question? Because Councillor Davis has already had two.
Given that we might have to now install gates to give access to it, and what is the height restriction? Are we allowed to put in a 1.8 metre fence? And what would be the cost of installing gates to then block off the front fence of this property?
Through your worship, to give you an accurate answer, I would have to take that on notice. However, when you serve a notice of intent, and it's called a Form 1, Notice of Intention to Erect a Fence, you need to include length and position of the proposed fence, the cost, the amount you wish to recover from the other party, and then the name and address of any contractor or other person who is to perform the work. So you would undertake that work first, get the full understanding of the cost, and then issue that in a Form 1, which is a note of his intention to erect a fence.
So if there's a property facing a road that council owns or council property, what is the height of the fence that you can erect in front of their front yard?
Excuse me, through the Mayor, that would depend where the fence was. Exactly, so I can't really answer the question specifically.
Some have 2.4 metres, some have 1.2 metres.
Yeah. Through the Mayor, it really does vary. Some are open, so there are no fences. Others have in excess of 2 metres high, so it's very difficult to say without being specific.
So, Mr Cooper, under the planning scheme, I know maximum side fence is 2.1. Does that apply to front fences as well, or is there a different maximum?
Apologies, I'd have to take that on notice.
Right. Councillor Hughes.
Sorry, I know this is going on for a very long time, but I appreciate that staff have gone and asked them to clear up the land. Have we specifically asked them in the past to install a fence and close off that property to make it secure?
Through the Mayor, no, we haven't.
Hence point 1.
I understand. I just,
You've got your mic on too, Chris. Councillor Cornish.
And I'm sorry for this question too.
I'm watching the time.
Yeah, given we're actually referring to the landlocked parcel of land, is it still okay to refer to it in the motion as 77 to 79 Main Street? Or is there a separate address for that landlocked block of land, which is the only block that we're talking about, the one at the back? Is that a separate address?
Through your worship, we've always referred in our previous dealings with these properties as well as those numbers. We have checked in property and rating, and that is how those properties are referred to as well. As best as we can be to answer your question right now, we're reasonably confident that that is fine for the purpose of your decision making.
Right, I don't have anyone else on my list. There are a number of people who have not yet spoken. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? If not, I will go back. Councillor Hughes.
Go on, I'll speak. I know we all want to get home without making too many funny jokes. I'm literally sitting on the fence because I'm sorry. Because in my mind, it's like, why don't we just go away and have the conversation and see if that's successful, and then come back. And I can't quite get my head around 1.3 and why that's specifically necessary when there's a current fence there. So perhaps Councillor Carbone can address that in closing. I appreciate where people are perhaps coming from. I think Councillor Piggott and Councillor Hubel have spoken very well to the motion, but I'm still not over the line yet, because I think, why don't we haven't specifically gone and asked them to put up a fence and deal with that. We've asked them to address the safety issues, and then why don't we, I don't know whether I would necessarily support 1.3. So if someone can clear that up, someone maybe that hasn't spoken, and why that's actually needed, other than just to make something look nicer. You know, I'm probably sitting here going, can't believe I'm going to be arguing over whatever it is, $2,000, but at 10 past 10 at night, after we've spent a significant amount of time on this and asking lots of questions, sometimes it isn't clear. So, yeah, I'm yet to be determined which way I will go, and I know I have very little time to make a decision, but yeah.
Right, is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will speak. I will vote for this motion as it currently stands. I have been persuaded by Councillor Piggott and Councillor Jones's commentary. Hubel, sorry. Well, Councillor Jones also spoke, I think, earlier. We all have. My main concern was the precedence which has been allayed by the CEO in terms of that, and I just didn't want every single resident to want to jump to us for 50%. This is a minimal cost for what was an awful situation that we found ourselves in with this laneway, and just thinking of the court costs if it'd gone the other way, I'm more than happy to entertain going down this avenue. I quite clearly see the motives down this lane. Yeah, I quite clearly see the motives behind it. Obviously, there is a bit of retribution, I feel, for the previous decision made, and that we should tidy it up. So, yeah. When you put everything on balance, I've got I will vote for the motion, although I probably wouldn't have voted for the original one, so I'm quite glad that it got varied. So I will support the motion as it stands.
Right, if there's no one else, Councillor.
Yes, I did receive from administration, just heard what Councillor Hughes said, and the team leader compliance has met the owner and believes he is unlikely to pay 50%. Right, so that's what I received from administration. But I'm kind of, if we had a motion, and I'm kind of a little bit like what Councillor Lemon said earlier, that if we had the first part, we engage with the owner and find out a bit more, because we haven't formally done that, I don't think, CEO, formally done that, and we come back with a report to us about how you went on, and then we can decide on 1.1, 1.2 or 1.3. So I'll vote against it because I just feel, I'm not sitting on the fence, I think I'm saying I just need a little bit more from the owner. And I do rely on the owner to say, okay, I can sense that, you know, I should be doing something, I don't know. But that's how I would like to go forward. So I'll vote against it, and perhaps we can come back with that motion next meeting. That's what I'm saying.
Right, is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Right, Councillor Carbone, it's up to you. Councillor Dawes, please turn your microphone on.
Thank you, Worship. In the next 3 minutes, while you're listening to me, I'd also just like you to once again just look at these photos, because from what I'm hearing around the chamber, I kind of get the feeling you haven't looked at these photos, and you probably haven't driven past the site. It is a very serious, very long-standing issue, and I suspect we're giving the owner a little more credit than I think he deserves. We are talking about a severely derelict property that has sat that way for the past 40 years. There are squatters because a number of residents who have either lived there a short time or a long time have confirmed this. You know, has he complied? Well, he's slashed the grass so it doesn't catch fire. If that's meeting requirements, then yes, okay, he's met those requirements. But has he met the requirement of being a good neighbour? Has he met the requirement of being a civil person? Well, you haven't been past the house. I have sat at too many dining room tables at too many properties that abut this land to try and think of any other way that we can deal with this. 40 years, very derelict. It is beyond quote unquote long grass and junk. You know, this is not something to be laughed at. This is not something to be scoffed at. This is a very sad situation, a very sad situation indeed. And it's easy for us to sit back and poke holes in the motion and look for excuses and look for reasons not to do this, but you're not the ones who has to face the residents tomorrow morning when I sit down with them and discuss what happened at the council meeting. So think about that for a moment. We don't need more reports. We are talking about $2,000. Let's not make this a bigger deal or a longer deal than it needs to be. There are good grounds to do what we need to do. And in terms of 83 Main Street, it's because that fence is utterly stuffed and it will just fall over any moment and then we have to come back all over again. As Councillor Piggott said, all too often residents turn to council for help. They turn to us for hope. And I'm certainly not one to sit on this council and turn them away. We can't tell them what we can't do. We need to do what we can do, regardless of how small it is. If there's anything we can do, we will do it. What Eastern Health will do, they will do. What the MFS will do, they will do. We need to do our small part. Otherwise, why are we here? Why would residents come to us ever again if we can't offer some level of support, some level of hope? It is severely derelict. Anyone driving past, anyone walking past, anyone who has lived next to it, seen it, watched it, would agree to the nth degree that it is severely derelict. It is safety, there is rusted iron everywhere. So please support this motion and please do it for the residents who have to look at this every day of the week. Think about them.
Thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? Right, division's been called. Those who are voted for, please stand. Councillor Cornish, Piggott, Carbone, Turnbull, Jones and Hubel. There's a number change. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Right, those against are Councillor Hughes, Davey, Davis, Lemon and Dawes. Which appears to me that I now have to cast in vote. Sorry? Was it 6-5? Oh, that's right, we've got the odd number. I forgot. Yes, I'm glad. I know which way I was going to vote, but okay, so that's carried.
Through Madam Mayor, it's not necessary in terms of decision-making process for council.
However,
but I'm in council's hands whether they appreciate the conversation this evening, or a quick update, as it were. I think I can do a quick update.
Okay.